So the year is 2030. I'm still watching like Nidalee spears and thresh hooks hit like a meter off a guy, but then snap onto the hit bot. Like, I don't want to be watching all this. And then the game just breaks. It's like, oh, we're going to chrono break it again now, Thorin. We've almost got it working. This is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight. Something, industry leading show. So we never actually came up with a tagline for this show. But then again, we actually didn't need one, because what people don't know, I actually think this genuinely is a reason why our careers have gone the way they have. When we made this show, nobody watched anything. There weren't any of these shows. There was like 1.5 of them, and then they were mad suspect at that. And in fact, I even went on some of these shows that were the big podcasts over the years back in the day. They were all losers, mate. They were all just people who genuinely either A, legitimately like the lore of League of Legends, or B, think playing the game League of Legends is the best thing, and just tangentially thought that like Dyrus is good or something like that's about as close to esports you got. So this is the real shit. You all know what Summoning Insight is, but of course Summoning Insight now is brought to you by Esports Bet, which is obviously crypto odds matrix, isn't it? So they have, if you've never deposited on their site, a 50% deposit bonus up to $200 and also if you
using
do
our referral
deposit yep, using the link in the description. And also, if you do deposit crypto, they will give you a 50x bonus in DJT, which is their token that they use to play in the competitions on their site, which we'll get to later, and we always mention anyway. So basically, if you put in $100 or USDT in this case, you would get 5,000 of the DJT as a bonus to play with in that competition. And obviously, as you see, we use the DJT where we make the bets. That competition is the one with the millions of dollars and the hundreds of thousands individual prizes all are. So we've gone over it in the past. We'll go over it later on. Anyway, let's get into the episode. What we talk about in this opening section is the question.
Well, we've got a lot of choices. Obviously, we'll save LEC for Nelson.
Yeah.
Right before we bring Nelson on, we will vent all of our frustrations about trade bugs and the remake so that he doesn't have to be in the danger zone. And they will allow him to express his opinion should he choose to once he comes on the show. So we'll save the LEC stuff for him. We can talk a little bit about LCK this week. We can talk about LCS, Team Liquid maybe looking a bit shaky. Which direction do you want to go with this?
We can do some LCS if you want. We'll start with some LCS.
We can talk about, if you want to have a laugh, we can talk about the complete fiesta that was the Immortals versus Dignitas game. I mean, there's a lot of angles. There's a lot of angles this week.
I mean, that was a game we had picked out. Didn't we have like Immortals on that one? Didn't we have the underdog picked?
Yeah, we did have on Competitive Edge, we did take that one. We also, by the way, took Cloud9 over 100 Thieves, which had 3-1 odds. So that was actually a huge upset. I mean, we can talk about Cloud9 going 2-0 with the new roster. I guess the Dignitas one wasn't too surprising, but what was interesting was that Cloud9 looks like they are significantly improved. Now, obviously, in the first week, we knew that their bot lane was playing really badly. And so they were having significant issues, especially with Fudge still out and at home. Now, he was still out and at home this week as well, it appeared, given the player cams. But they actually had a full week of practice with their new bot lane. Sven actually looked surprisingly good on support already. Wasn't a shock that he had been grinding a bunch, but for him to have this synergy already, to be able to execute on some of these roams, know when to like head into mid lane or head out on the map with those kind of timers, I thought was really impressive. I think they looked really solid overall in the 100 Thieves game. It was certainly for a team that had a week of practice, looked much better than expected. 100 Thieves increasingly looking like a team that will not be headed towards the World Championship.
I mean, that's the more interesting one to me. Obviously, no one knows how good Cloud9 is going to be. They've only just got the new roster together. I don't give a fuck about the games with the stand-ins. The 100 Thieves angle is the more interesting one to me, Monty, because the actual implication, if you look at the way the playoffs in the last split went, the regular split before they made playoffs, and now the way the split's begun, like, do people forget that in the split they won last year, they weren't even the best for most of that split? Like, this genuinely looks like the window's like closing on this team, mate. It's sad because on paper it's still a great roster, but it just doesn't show up in the server. You just don't get the players you think you do.
All right. So here's the thing about 100 Thieves is that they peak really high and like nobody expected them to win. I mean, Evil Geniuses was definitely the favorite given their strong end to the summer split, and they kind of choked in the playoffs. And you could make an argument that in the playoffs, a lot of teams that you expected to underperformed, and then also simultaneously 100 Thieves overperformed. So it could be just a very fortunate peak valley situation for 400 Thieves, where they were peaking while the other teams were headed into the dumpster. But they do, it seems like, tend to come together towards the end of the split. We saw very similarly bad performances for them in spring, and they still made a pretty deep playoff run, all things considered. So, I mean, Abadange's performance has not been good. I don't know how this guy just fell off a cliff over the last year, because he looked fine coming out of Europe in summer.
I don't know if you saw this, but there was even a stat I remember that actually Parth, who obviously now is no longer with TSM, he posted this on Twitter. He said something like that basically, if they stay together, this lineup of 100 Thieves, it's like, I think it was like the lineup, aside from maybe like Cloud9's back in the day, it's the lineup that's been together the longest in LCS without any changes. Because if you look back, basically, like true, some of them are a bit scuffed. Like, for example, TSM only changed player because obviously like Doublelift just skipped the split and stuff. So there would have been other teams that could have done it.
Sure.
But like, that's pretty noticeable, because basically what we're pointing out here is teams do not usually get this many splits together. Like, actually, this team, by the way, there's a world where they could now be a back-to-back reigning champion. They just happen to have only won one time, but like, it's actually rare you keep the same lineup. So for me, this split is like it for this team. Like, you got to get something big done. This split potentially in the championship, go to Worlds, because the odds that you just keep the same 5 players for like 2 years is not very long. It's not very likely, rather.
I mean, I do think it's interesting that if that's going to be the case, that we've seen 100 Thieves give up a bunch of their amateur players. So, you know, they gave up Luger to CLG. They just gave up Kenby to who has looked bad. Even though Immortals is not a good team, like, he has looked bad in isolation on Immortals, so that's worrying, I would say. But they haven't exactly been using the pipeline that they've created for talent. And also, I mean, there isn't really
wow, who could have fucking predicted? That's why I'm sick of these fucking owners, man. I'm sick of the owners and coaches and GMs all gaslighting me that they're this pipeline. They never use their own talent. They just buy. The joke is they are going to get talent. It's just going to be from Europe. They'll buy that guy and he'll come over. We all know how it goes. We all know how it goes.
I mean, I do think it is surprising to see 100 Thieves in this particular position, because if you look at the last few years, there have been times, and there has been a narrative that, oh, wow, you know, Huhi and FBI are the strongest bot lane duo. Oh. Well, in theory, now, the way they got to be the strongest bot lane duo, it is true. They were favoring some like pretty early game, like Huhi playing set support and stuff like that. So it hasn't really been in the traditional kind of sit back and scale style, but you should be, if you're FBI, capable of playing a scaling AD carry and still doing well and getting into the late game. If you think about Abadange as a player, a lot of his most played champions of all time are on control mages. I mean, it's like his top 3 champions are Ryze, Azir, Orianna, and the 4th is Zoe. Okay, so he's used to playing long range control mages. So you would think, okay, this should be a relatively good meta for him as well. Okay. Someday, been very stable in lane for the last year. He had a slump before that, but he's come back and he's looked relatively good overall. And Closer has been very good in the early game. And this has been an early game team. Now you could say, well, games are going longer now on average. Their mid and late game macro decision-making has been bad, but it doesn't really explain why even their laning phases have gone to shit at this point in time. They just look really out of it across the board, and maybe they can get it together again. They do seem to snap back into it when it matters, but
I don't think they will.
I don't think they will. I don't think they will this time.
Here's
this
also
time
why.
Seems different.
Because there's 2 factors. One, this is why I also hate the narrative. I get why they have to do it. It is their whole job and they have to justify their existence. But I hate this shit narrative that coaches and players and the media have, that every week you're like learning lessons and you're adding, and eventually you're all going to be like the ultimate team. Spoiler, if your team's already been together with the same lineup like one of the longest times ever in history, and you still haven't figured out how to close games in macro in the mid game, you're never going to figure it out, mate. Like, it's not like Reaper isn't doing these lessons, you know. He hasn't like waited until now. Like, I'll wait a couple of splits in. Like, he's been doing this from week 1. And this is a guy, by the way, who already knows all that shit. Like, I don't have any doubt about his knowledge base. Some of the players even have been excellent players at times in their careers. So, like, I don't know about this, mate. Like, that just implies to me they're never going to get it. And this is the other point I would make. This is also why you can never rest on your laurels in a game. Because guess what? If you have one strength, like you were saying there, like, well, we always get ahead in the early game. Yeah, but what happens if you don't? Yeah, tell you what, the time you don't, you're fucking done as a teammate because you got no strengths left. Because that's what's so whack. Like when you run through it like that, that's the saddest thing. There's still no reason on paper this lineup couldn't be really good. They could be the best team in theory.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, the individual talent just doesn't seem to be there. Their strengths that they rode on for a lot of the existence of this lineup. Closer dominating early game jungling, Abadage being a strong mid laner, their bot duo, even when they had a bad mid laner, like their bot duo was propping this team up. And nobody seems to want to carry on this roster right now. Like there isn't a perceivable strength that they are operating from. And the irony of Closer's name is that he can't close games, right? Like that he can get a lead, but oftentimes it results in them throwing or playing extremely sloppy mid and late game macro. And that problem's never been solved with this roster. And at this point, I just have to assume that this group of players is utterly incapable of solving that issue. They need a different voice for macro on this team. And I think that's hard. Now, obviously, if you're looking at performance this year overall, Abadage seems like the clear player to cut, and you can replace him with another import because he's taking up an import slot already. And then there's Huhi, right? The thing about Huhi is he's not taking up an import slot, which makes him valuable in and of itself. But if you need to add a macro voice to the team, you would typically do that in a support role, right? So I think it's rough. I think it's a really rough position for 100 Thieves to be in. And you want to commit to these players because it's hard to get rid of the roster when they've made back-to-back LCS finals and have won one of them, right? Like it's really tough to make that call when you're doing so well.
It is, but here's the thing. You want to be the greatest dogs of all time, you got to make those calls.
Yep.
Like, by the way, if people don't know, those really are the margins in sports. Like,
I mean, it's the Mad
sports,
Lions call, right?
What I love about sports is there are teams, some of them are so great, and by the way, this takes greatness to do this. They can even win the championship and still make cuts and upgrades. If you could do that, by the way, you have actually mastered like what it takes to be like a true businessman, in my opinion. Because the problem is you don't want to let sentimentalism get into it. You can do that if you want, but if you do it, your aim isn't to win the most championships. By definition, it's to have a nice time while winning championships. I agree. Like, even though the problem is they're making that final does, in his esports terms, justify keeping them together. I would make a gamble move. Like, for example, the main problem I have with this lineup goes like this, Monte. I never thought Abadage was like the best fucking mid laner anyway. Like, that's the real problem. Because you won that split, everyone's talking like he's like some like Bjergsen 2.0. Mate, he's like Bjergsen 0.75. What are you talking about? Like, he was good in Europe. He was nowhere close to the top. He wasn't like the best player. So to me, the problem is like, people are acting like he can be like the Jensen Bjergsen. Like, we'll just always build around him, keep him. It's like, I don't know about that. Like, I'll give him his chances. If he's good and the meta's working for him, cool. He's a good player. But it's not like the defining player you have to have on this team, though. Like for example, it's obviously too late now. But if there'd have been a chance to like change him for Jensen, for example, I would take it in an instant. But that's just me.
I think the other problem with 100 Thieves is even though they've made back-to-back finals, we have to consider
they should probably have considered Nisqy for this team as well, mate. This could have been a great team for Nisqy, don't you think so?
Yes. I think Nisqy probably would have helped out Closer early on the map. Yeah. I mean, Nisqy could have gone to a lot of teams. Nisqy could have gone back to Cloud9. It probably would have been fine. Nisqy obviously going to Mad Lions, I think suits Mad Lions extremely well. Well, I'm sure we'll talk more about Nisqy with Jensen. It obviously was pretty criminal that he didn't get a team in spring, given that there are a million worse mid laners, especially in the West. And he's played in multiple teams in both LCS and LEC, so he's a known quantity in both leagues. Anyway, it's we'll talk to Nelson about that. But I do think that what's ridiculous is like if you actually look at the circumstances of 100 Thieves wins. So last year when they actually won, obviously like you would have expected Team Liquid to do pretty well, but they were, they suffered from a lot of turnover within the team and underperformance overall.
Still almost beat 100 Thieves in that series, though.
Still almost won.
Still almost beat them,
yeah. You look at Cloud9, like they really faded down the stretch. But if you rewind time to the beginning of 2021, you would have said, on paper, with Perks moving over to C9 and Team Liquid, it was the spring final that we had. These are going to be the two strongest teams. And then even by the end of summer, EG was looking really hot with Jizuke, and they were the favorites, as I said earlier, coming into those playoffs before they choked. So it's not super convincing when we see 100 Thieves win in what was a rather disappointing performance from a lot of loaded rosters, or at least rosters that were hotter coming into the playoffs. And if you look at this time around, if we're going to be truly honest, like 100 Thieves should have won that final. It should not be the case that Abadage loses to a rookie NA mid laner in a grand final in that rookie mid laner's like first stadium match. Like that's not a good result. Like, yes, EG did a fantastic job of taking over those playoffs and just running through the lower bracket, and I'm not taking anything away from them, but there have to be higher expectations of 100 Thieves performance compared to a team that is as young and as raw and frankly as flawed as EG was in that playoff run. And those flaws were very readily exposed when we saw them at MSI. So I think the whole thing was disappointing. We're also coming off the titanic disappointment of Team Liquid last split that we touched on with Kyoto in the last episode. And there are a lot of caveats in terms of how that team like didn't have core, took a while to get together, everything like that, and have looked better so far this split, although this week was a little shaky, gotta say. So I don't know. I feel as though 100 Thieves have gotten a lot of breaks. They peaked very briefly for the right time and then have been kind of subsisting on the underperformance of other rosters. And Abadage, last split was a terrible split in mid lane for LCS. It was fucking horrible. Like it was probably this isn't even like I think an over exaggeration. It is possible that was the worst mid lane split of LCS history. And if it's not, the only years of comparison would be like 2013, 2014. Like it was a long time ago.
I think unironically, over half of the LEC mid laners seemed better than anyone in LCS. It was ridiculous. It was actually ridiculous. Also, on the 100 Thieves point, here's the other angle that I think people will miss. I only was talking about the time they've had this specific 5-man lineup. Well, remember, this org genuinely gambled multiple splits before to get this lineup. Remember, they gave up all those stupid splits with the fucking, what was his name, Rioma and the Monte swap. The whole reason they were doing that, remember, was because at the time they were like still finagling to when they got someday with the green card so they could make this lineup like this. So the real problem as well is you also built up, this was your window, you built for this window. It's just for me, in my opinion, this last split, especially with how it's going now, this is it. Like, it's either going to end brilliantly and you get it all together at the very end, doesn't seem plausible right now, but let's see, or it's just going to end, it's going to sort of like, you could have had the 2 championships, you got the 1, you didn't win the second, it's gonna fizzle out gradually and by the way, that's the fear for me, because as you say, the spring, that was almost the most wide open fucking split of all time. You didn't win that one. Like, that's going to look pretty bad, because by the summer's playoffs now we're going to be way harder, like 3 times harder.
I totally agree. Like, it's way more competitive at the top, and like the rosters look significantly better both on paper and in terms of the initial performances that we've seen. Like, even though, Team Liquid probably should have gone 0-2 this week, they do look a lot better than they did in the spring, where they were kind of tragic. Cloud9 isn't a like LS Summit Clown Fiesta like it was in the early stages of spring. Not saying that it was anybody's fault, guys, but it was a Clown Fiesta. Like, what happened was a Clown Fiesta. So I think this roster seems like it's a lot more solid, so they should be more competitive. EG, obviously, coming off of all that MSI practice, is going to be highly competitive. And there are at least some teams like CLG that are overperforming, or at least surprising people with their performance so far. So,
what do you actually think of EG, by the way? Obviously, bearing in mind, to be fair, they haven't played the real Cloud9, but what have you thought of EG? Like, do they actually look like they can be the champion again? Are they going to be a top team to you? Do they level out?
So they did make some really dumb plays against CLG, where a game that basically should have been won late was they had an opportunity when they had like Elder and Baron to come back into this game, and it was kind of thrown by Danny going for a really stupid kill onto contracts that really didn't matter because they were running this late game like Ezreal Corki poke composition. And if you just recalled and set up for the next the next iteration, the next respawn of Baron and Elder, they had such strong control with their poke comp and their scaling at that point in the game that it would have been very unlikely for CLG to win. And there also wasn't really there wasn't anything you could have done with that kill on contracts. Like, it wasn't going to lead into anything. And Dom tweeted about this, but I do think it's a salient point about LCS teams, which is that they often like tend to waste a lot of resources, particularly summoner spells, a couple minutes before objectives, and they just trade really weirdly. And Danny like flashed on the Ezreal, didn't get this kill because he didn't realize that contracts had a stopwatch. But even if contracts had died, like, there wasn't a point in getting that kill, so the risk was just like not worth the reward, and it certainly wasn't worth the flash that he might have needed at the next fight. So it really, I think that part was kind of disappointing overall, which is that they fought their way back into a game from behind and then managed to throw that game anyway. So
let's go on that though. Let's do a sidebar, because the obvious sidebar, it's an abstract point about the game of League of Legends right now, Monty. The point is this, right? I think I can even nail it. Here's the issue. People still play like it's the old League of Legends before the dragons. Like, they keep forgetting, Monty, the whole game. That's why I keep saying it's like you're not playing an open world. You're not playing fucking Zelda where you can go around the whole fields of Hyrule, Monty, and choose to go here and have an adventure here. You're playing Time Crisis. You just get moved between dragon, soul, baron, dragon. So all you do is dragon, baron, herald. Like, so in this scenario, the whole game plan genuinely should be someone within the team should essentially be shot calling, like, in a minute or so, we're going to go for this dragon. You should have the game plan in mind of what you're going to do, because this is actually, as you say, it's actually like an amateur mistake when you consider how many times teams do stuff like take a pointless skirmish, which even if you win, you get like 2 kills from. It doesn't even do anything on the map. But they'll do it when, like, if you fuck it up and you waste like summoners like this, now you just like can't take the next fight or whatever, or you just lose, or like your ADC will just die immediately without a flash or something like that. People have got to essentially understand like the value of the flash in that sense. It's way higher than just getting the kill.
And I think Dom's point on Twitter is correct, which is that if you can fight these skirmishes in between objectives, right? Absolutely, especially if you're the team that's ahead. But you have to know exactly what your goal in that skirmish is, and it has to be like, I'm going to burn this TP, or I'm going to burn this flash, and I'm going to trade it for a lower cooldown ability, like, you know, an ultimate or something like that. And then at that point in time, it makes more sense for you because you've set yourself up. That cooldown will be back up for the objective. Their cooldown will not. And you get these incremental advantages from these skirmishes. So they do actually have to have a purpose. So yeah, I think that's a core issue, and like that's what we saw in this game as well. I mean, the other obvious
as well to understand here, if you're a casual, is individual players aren't always going to be able to make these choices. It's like a team thing. You've got to coach them to understand, because essentially it's a classic problem League's had as it's evolved, Monty. When the game began, you just go for every kill you can if you can get it, because every kill in your brain's like an extra kill is gold, is a kill. Like, no, like now, like it's actually more, if you notice these decisions, it's more like, is this an efficient decision? Because sometimes I see it all the time in LCS, dude. They go for kills and waste ults, and I'm like, that's not even worth it, dude. Like, now you can't even have a team fight because you wasted 2 ults on this one foot. Like, you killed the support, you weren't even in a 5v5. You know what I mean? Like, people still almost have like the solo queue mentality sometimes. They just greed for kills.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this game should have been over long before this point anyway, if we're being honest, because the only reason EG got back into this was because, again, objective bounties are huge, and it is egregious. And we'll talk to Nelson about this because it actually happened in their Vitality game as well. But when a team has Dragon Soul, it is absolutely absurd what you can do with this one... like what you can do in terms of bounty comebacks if the other team has it, because you could be even in gold, and if the other team has Dragon Soul, all of a sudden you have objective bounties, because the more I see, because we don't know exactly what triggers objective bounties, but almost every time that there's a Dragon Soul on the map, it allows the team that is behind to be ahead in gold. Right?
I just hate League of Legends. Because what I hate is like every iteration of the game is some form of blue shell. Why always a blue shell? All I'm trying to think of that. Listen, I know this is an abstract point, guys, but just think for a second. There are no blue shells in sports. There's no like, look, in the Super Bowl, like remember that Super Bowl where Peyton Manning got absolutely dicked by the Seahawks, right? It's not like at the end they go, and here's the bonus last minute though. If he gets a fucking 80-yard Hail Mary, he'll win the game. Like, what would the point of that be? It would totally undo everything brilliant about the sport. But League is just rammed with these fucking comeback mechanics.
Also, coincidentally, how you can tell that the J.K. Rowling designed Quidditch knowing nothing about sports, because the fact that you can get that many points for catching the golden snitch and just invalidate the entire rest of the game from happening.
That's true.
I mean, that is basically the analogy of what happens right now. It's like one team will be super far up. Oh man, we controlled dragon from 6 minutes. Now we got the dragon soul, and then all of a sudden, like EG fucking catches the golden snitch. And it's just like, what the fuck, man? Like, why did I do all of this work? How did I control 4 consecutive dragons, secure them properly, and then now I'm just getting punished. I lose Baron, and even though they're ahead in gold and they have the Baron buff, there are still objective bounties. Like, they're still getting more money funneled into them. It's so stupid.
Also, what's that logic of like, seems like you're winning the game a bit too hard. Like, what's my bad to fuck my shit up then, fam? What are you talking about? Like, why does the game have to be like this? Why can't I just reward people for good things, punish people for bad things? I understand you're obviously the most satanic company ever, Riot, but actually making your own game an inversion of reality where the good are punished and the terrible are held up and praised and given a chance to win. It's a bit too far. It almost implies there's a darkness within you. Why are you not trying to make a wonderful game where it's all awesome?
I think it definitely needs some like tweaking, especially around the dragon soul to the objective bounties, where a team that has soul is not quite so heavily punished. Because that's really the most egregious factor. We'll talk to Nelson about that as well. But I mean, if we're honest, like EG should never really have been in this game, because of how hard they were losing for the vast majority of it. And, credit to CLG. They found a roster, at least in this meta, that seems to work for them. I don't think that this is probably going to be... I don't think they're going to be a deep threat in the playoffs, especially in over a best of 5 compared to the favorites, which are Team Liquid, EG, and C9 at this point in time. But, they could have a respectable top 5 finish in this league, and that would be, I think, pretty good for them. People are hyped right now because they're tied for first place. But again, we've also touched on that. Their strength of schedule was, not amazing for the first week of play, but they did, in fact, pass the test of beating EG, although they did almost throw that game, and then they also lost to Flight.
It's impressive to win that many games with just all like NA talent except the Luga guys. Remember, even these are minor region. I think that's just impressive in itself. Even if they don't win any more games, they're already started. That's pretty legit.
Yeah,
because on paper, no one would give that roster a chance. Everyone would just hate on it, wouldn't they? Of course, understandably, it's got no big names in it, has it?
I mean, I don't think that on paper that roster is the worst team in the league. Like that honor, I think, is to toss this low. But yes, you wouldn't have said this team is going to be 4-1 at the start of the season. Although perhaps with Cloud9's like kind of roster issues, you would have said, okay, maybe like C9 is going to be underperforming a little bit. But now that C9 had a 2-0 week, it won't really matter. Again, you only really have to. Ideally in LCS, obviously you make top 6 because that way you get 2 lives in the double elimination bracket. Like getting 7th and 8th gives you 1 life for the entire time, which is really, really difficult. You just have to not lose for the entire playoffs, which would be a crazy run. But I mean, C9 should be comfortably in the top 6 right now, which is really the only thing that actually matters.
What I did appreciate though is this. I was actually getting a bit worried at first because obviously TSM won a game against Team Liquid. So I was like, bloody hell, we're going to have to compliment TSM. But then they did us a favor and immediately got dusted off by Golden Guardian. So that's all good. Thank you. Universe gives, universe takes away. That's all cool. It's all fine.
Also, I mean, there isn't a universe where we thought TSM would be worse with this roster. I mean,
it shouldn't even be as bad as they are, mate. They should be slightly better than they are now. Come on.
Yeah, I think they'll get their shit together. Spica had a really good early game against Team Liquid. That win was really one-sided, very convincing.
Yeah.
Maple had a good game. People have been talking up Maple in my conversations with them about how he's doing individually in the.
Did you see the Georgia Pion trash talk though? Oh no, it was Spica. I keep forgetting because actually they're like the 2 main NA trash talkers now. Double semi-retired. Did you see the Speaker tweet?
No,
it's pretty good. What he did was right after that game, he just tweeted something like, like the Bjergsen International like underperformance like came early this year. Or something. It was like. All right. I said I like it. I dig
That's
it, man.
fun.
Yikes. Yeah.
I hope
pretty hard. That's
I
hard.
hope
I like
Spica
that.
goes to a
I
good
like that.
team. Spica to Team Liquid next year. I think we can safely replace Santorin at this point in time. Santorin's mechanics are a little suspect at this stage in his career, and I think if you had to upgrade one part of that roster, although I will say Hansama has looked really bad so far this split by Hansama standards, guys, because there's no excuse for Hansama. It's a fucking Callista Draven meta. Are you kidding me? Hansama should be absolutely popping off right now, and he's just dying in lane randomly in 2v2s. Like, you expect so much out of this Hansama core JJ roster, especially considering Hansama was probably the best carry, or look, arguably the best carry last year in LEC. I think, you know, you could say Upset was certainly up there, but among like top two, okay, let's put him up at top two. And he, like Abadage, has just kind of fallen off a cliff since coming over to NA. Was fine, was okay like last split, but he's not the. He was brought here to be lane dominant with core JJ, and now he's just like giving up kills to a TSM duo of Mia and Tactical. I mean, that's not okay. That's not okay. As we can see with Abadage and Hansama, the skill vampires in NA are very real, apparently, at this time of year. Very real.
Also, here's the joke. Obviously, now everyone's just going to go on and on about that Danny and fucking Jojo Pion story till the end of time. But the real story, if you actually look over the last few years, is fucking junglers. It's that Speaker and Blabber exist. Like, these are players who are actually like competent, like NA players on an international scale. Like, these are good. This is the real future of NA, by the way, is these players. We'll see if the AG ones make it. They're so young in their careers. Who the fuck knows? It all depends how these next couple of years go. These two are legit players. Like, Speaker and Blabber will be around for years and years and years. And it looks like they're going to be some of the top talent. Like, they actually look very legit players. I didn't even blame Speaker for last split, mate. That team was garbage. I don't think he could have done anything with that team. I'm not surprised if he had a morale dip or something. I would. Who the fuck wouldn't? They were last place for fuck's sake in the whole LCS. Meanwhile, also you're looking over and motherfuckers like Hooney just getting millions of dollars. Like, God, that's awesome. Great.
Look, I think Speaker's likely going to get a big contract from somebody. You know, at the end of this time. I actually don't know what his contract situation is right now. Is he a free agent at the end of the season, or did he pull a Bjergsen and sign like an 8-year contract? With
I thought he extended, didn't he?
Oh, actually, no. It expires at the end of this year, so he could be free sometime soon. Could be free sometime soon. He will definitely be a hot commodity. You'd have to assume, like, probably a lot of teams would do well to have him on the roster instead of their current jungler. Arguably, 100 Thieves as well, depending on whether they want to keep closer or not. Yeah. I don't know any other topics you really want to hit on in LCS. Like, it wasn't, I don't think, the most exciting week.
I've got a question for you. Right, technically, when we criticised them, like, let me think, earlier last split. Let me just think a second, because technically it's next year that's actually like 10 years of LCS, right? So how does that even get counted? Actually, I think it should be next year, right?
No, I think it's this summer they're doing it. Actually, I'm not sure. I think it's this summer.
I thought they hinted something about it before this split, didn't they? Didn't they do like a video that implied there was going to be something?
I think it's for this summer. Yeah, I think they're actually doing more of that content. Yeah.
Okay. Because the only thing I have a problem, the problem I have with LCS is this. I don't even really understand what they think the theme of the league is anymore. Because I made this video like maybe a year and a half ago or something, where I said I actually think the area where NA missed the boat completely is thinking it could ever be like the best competitive region or like even comparable. Like, I think that's a pipe dream personally. What I would have lent into was having all those personalities, because the LCS began with easily the best set of personalities of anyone, because I had all the streamers that people don't know. Like, at the time, Koreans were nobody. We didn't know them. We didn't know what they did in the server. Even Europeans were just only good for being really good at the game, or there was about like 4 of them that were streamers and enormous streamers, like Froggen and fucking, you know, those, but it wasn't many. Like, put it this way, right. Even some of the medium EU talent didn't even stream. So I always thought like the area they didn't make use of, because they sadly went the Disney route, was they made it try. They wanted, here's the real problem, Monty. They wanted to be the NFL. They should have been WWE. They could have, if they were the WWE, the stories could to this day would be amazing, wouldn't they? Like, imagine the storylines you could kept running.
Yeah, look, I think that's absolutely true. There wasn't ever a universe where they were remotely competitive, especially when they started. I mean, LCS was the quality of play in LCS when they launched LCS in 2013 was abysmal. It was
It was.
really bad.
People
guys.
don't know those bottom teams were absolutely outrageous.
Even the top teams were outrageously bad. The only exception was maybe like Cloud9, but they were outrageously bad by international standards. And yeah, the bottom teams, like, holy shit, were just incredibly
All you need to know
bad.
is this is actually how you know how bad LCS was. Because when teams like TSM were going to like Season 3 Worlds, people were talking up that they just didn't totally get smashed. That was like them not just instantly being destroyed by like a Chinese or Korean team was talked up as like, they did well. Like, they didn't win these games, boys. They just lost them. But people were like, actually, for a while Turtle was like hanging around in lane. It's like, if you're actually any good, you win the bloody game. What are you talking about? Like, that was the moment I knew, like, they just fucked out. And as you say, Cloud9 was the only ones, and that was the stupid tournament where they got seeded straight into the quarters. So they played 3 games in a whole world championship. So, yeah, but returning to the question, though, here's the problem. It's a real question, right? People think when I say, because I've said it the last 2 international tournaments, Monty, I genuinely think it would solve a lot of problems if NA just becomes considered a minor region. People think I'm saying that to like diss them, like, EU over NA, like, oh, NA, lol, Americans, no. Like, I'm not even joking. I genuinely think the level of play in the region deserves it. I think it would immediately, but by the way, there's even an upside to this, idiot Americans. The reason why I think it would be fair to make NA a minor region is because then you don't have to make some fucked up special rule that only NA gets. Like, NA can have all minor, everyone else, you don't get them, though, because NA needs help. Like, that's like some fucking mum, like you brother have a go. Like, that's not the way fucking sports work. They're just in sports go.
Oh, you're not ready for what's going to happen.
For a while now, the NFC just gets to have an extra draft pick. Like, what? Like, what are you talking about? You don't just do that after the NFC won for like 15 years. So I think personally, it would make way more sense because you can't go the other way. Like I'm saying, the days when it was a major, that's over, mate. It's just over. And everyone who's going to go, but what about this one team that did something? That's called the exception that proves the rule. You are aware of that principle.
So right? you are going to be highly disappointed. So here's my informed theory. Let's put it that way. You guys can read into that euphemism. I think Riot is going to open up all minor regions at the end of this year to become residents of any major region. So right now, obviously, it's only like it's Oceania that like the Australian players can come over and play in LCS. I think they will open it up to the Brazilians, the Turkish league, the Japanese league. I think that will probably, and obviously, if you guys are looking at this, Taiwan probably as well. I think if you guys are looking at this, it will be obvious that this doesn't benefit anybody who isn't LCS because no other team, except for the Chinese teams, are only going to import Koreans. They're not going to import a Turkish guy, right? So it only really benefits LCS in this particular instance, unless, I will say this, unless, and this could be good for viewership, it's possible that, let's say, a lower tier LEC team might field a mostly Turkish roster in order to start branding themselves as like a Turkish team and appealing to the audience of that region. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me if Immortals dumps their roster after this year, gets an entirely Brazilian roster, rebrands to MIBR, which they already own, and then brings a big influx of Brazilian fans. It would be much better for the company that runs them to do something like that. So I don't think it's going to stop Thorin. And the other reason why they're not going to be demoted to minor region status is as follows. There has to be somebody to replace them based on the current format, unless they blow up the world's format, which again, we want them to do, but they will never do because they're too arrogant.
Yes.
But if they were to do that, they would have to replace it. And the problem with replacing it is you would obviously replace it with Vietnam. But the issue is that Vietnam has not been able to reliably compete internationally for the last couple of years. So you can't provide a justification. So what's going to happen is LCS is going to be mad propped up by a change to the rules that will allow minor regions to play for them. And they have been basically gifted the opportunity to maintain their major region status because Vietnam has not been able to compete due to the pandemic, or their teams just opting not to compete. Their top team opting not to compete like they did at MSI.
Here's the issue, though.
So Monte, that's my theory, man. Let's see if it goes.
Now everyone's going to finally understand why on these shows, like they always think, why are you so skeptical? Why don't you just give people a chance? Because they're all full of shit. What part haven't you, my whole career has been exposing that they're all full of shit. So here's chapter 1 million of why everyone in the LCS is full of shit. because they've just spent years. It's the whole impetus behind why the CG team exists, gaslighting you that their ultimate goal is to bring NA talent forwards, right? You are aware, by definition, this is the best move you could do to deny NA talent spots ever again in LCS. Just say, oh, you know, all the rest of the world, everyone else that actually in theory could want to play in LCS, yeah, just count them as NA players. If you think it was hard already for someone like fucking Golden Glue to compete against NA people to get into LCS, imagine being Golden Glue and you're literally competing against Maple and some fucking sick Turkish mid laner and some fucking sick Brazilian top. Like, you're never going to get in the LCS again. Rookie guys, forget about it. You'll get you one split and that's it. Because here's the problem. Even though tactically it is the right move to do, remember, I don't care about NA talent. So for me, it's going to make a better product. I will enjoy LCS way more when I can see the best fucking, like I said, like fucking Australian jungler play along with the best Taiwanese mid laner.
Like
an
all-star, like for me, I'm much more interested in like a Brazilian all-star team being in the LCS, because here's the thing.
It is going to kill NA talent though, mate. Like, there's no reason NA talent should essentially almost exist at this point.
I don't know. Because like the higher concentration of good players you have in the region, the better solo queue gets. So I don't know if that's true. Like it will at least make the ladder or champions queue more challenging. So
it's the problem though. I think that just like in LEC, you know, whether people, it's not that they actually know that this guy coming in is better than Nisqy. It's just they're willing to gamble. The allure is the gamble, right? It's the premise of, oh, what if secretly he is like Vithio and he's just going to be the MVP? The problem is the import angle. The fact that you didn't have that guy in your region, in your solo queue, I think is why teams will be so. Essentially, I think no joke. Places like Turkey and fucking Oceania, Brazil, they're just it's going to be a mad talent drain, in my opinion. I think anyone who has like real promise will just go immediately to an LCS team. I mean, that's I might be over-exaggerating, but I think it's going to happen. I think it's logical.
If it makes LCS better, that's what I want. And I think you have to look at this from a business perspective too, which is that objectively, LCS is really struggling when it comes to viewership, especially considering if we compare it to 5 years ago. You know, a match in 2016 between CLG and TSM would have 400,000 concurrent viewers. And now there are matches that are down at like 60, 50. Like, if the games start at the same time as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, where LEC is still on because of delays and LCS starts, LCS will have like 20K viewers. And it's not until that they get hosted out and the viewership gets dumped. But like, the post-game show at LEC has had more viewers than the LCS when they've been going on simultaneously, like a game. So it's not, it's not doing well. And also, you have to provide some way for bottom teams to make money and effectively like prove themselves as valuable. And if I was Immortals and I owned MIBR, which for those of you who don't know is an incredibly popular org and brand that they own in Brazil, where it just seems like in Counter-Strike, whenever they pick up a new roster of even nobodies, those players get like famous overnight, like the fans all cheer for them. Also, Immortals has their entire MIBR TV that they operate. So they have like a broadcast studio in Brazil that caters to this fan base that could come on as a Brazilian language, coverage of the LCS, and it would be immensely popular. And the LCS needs that viewership to survive at this point, basically. And if I'm an owner of an LCS team, even if I'm not the one doing that, I want those eyeballs on the LCS, and I think it's good because right now the bottom teams aren't doing anything, guys. They have no angle. They have no angle, no fans, no audience, right? They've got fucking nothing. And they're not going to spend money because they have no way to make money, guys. If you have an opportunity to appeal to a specific audience and own that market as a team, then all of a sudden you're going to be incentivized to spend that money again. So I actually think that this could be really good for the LCS overall. It certainly would increase my personal enjoyment of watching it because, like you're saying, Thorin, I don't personally give a fuck about NA talent.
Oh, I agree. Just miss me with all the fucking sob stories about NA talent. Like, no one actually cares. No one does. Right. And they never did. Let's be real.
And if we're going to be honest, guys, like...
Well, beyond actually the Peter Duns of the world, fair play. They at least put their money where their mouth is. At least they're actually putting them in the team. Fair play.
I know a lot of you say you care about, like, NA talent and you're excited about watching LCS because of Danny and Jojopian, but you are the minority compared to the number of Brazilian people who would watch LCS CB LOL has like 40K concurrent viewers. And if they had a team in LCS, all that fan base would come on over, especially if there's a big brand like MIBR in the league, which one of your partner teams already owns the brand of. It seems like such a fucking no-brainer to me.
The only problem is, as you say, the numbers always bear out that those people are the minority, but speak like they're the majority. Like, they're basically the same people in CSGO who always say, I love upsets, they are better for viewership. And then Gambit, upsettingly, becomes the number one team in the world by upsetting everyone, and then no one watches the games. Like, sound. So you were just lying then, just having a lie, cool. Or you're just one guy speaking for everyone. That's the problem. One of the two.
And the other thing about NA talent, Thorin, is like, if you had other talent come in, you could actually have a legitimate, like, all-American roster that would be competitive, because you need to concentrate the NA talent, right? So if you have one team that's like the Brazilian team and one team that's like the Turkish team or the Australian team, then you could legitimately have an all-NA team that would be good, because all of the good players could just get together on one team, and it would actually make sense from a competitive perspective. So I think from a viewership and branding perspective, it would be extremely, extremely good for the LCS to pull this, because they've got no way back. They've got no other levers to pull at this point in time. Going back to your WWE example, they didn't do that because, unfortunately, the people who were in charge of the broadcast at that time, and, you know, let's be real, mostly still are in charge of the broadcast, although they have brought in like new creative people, and that's why the content has improved. But the reason why they didn't do that WWE thing, Thorin, is because the people who were in charge knew jack shit about the game. So they didn't know how bad their region was. So they just wanted to pretend that they were the NFL, because they're like, well, we don't know how good these players are, so we're just going to be the best league, the most serious sports league. And it's like, you can't do that when your fucking region is a dumpster fire joke. Like, you have to do something else with the content. And they were riding on the coattails of very popular streamers at the time, or very popular brands that they had nothing to do with building. Absolutely nothing to do with building. And then they just rode it into the ground. And once those players left and rode off into the sunset, did their own brands, now they just have to have them as co-streamers who are stealing 50% of your entire league's viewership. And you know what? They deserve it. You didn't do jack shit for Double Lift LCS. Double Lift did things for Double Lift.
No, Double Lift did more for the LCS than the LCS did for Double Lift.
Exactly. Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Of course. So, I mean, good for him that they keep cutting his ability to co-stream, right? But those personalities, people like Sneaky, like Meteos, like I'm a Cutie Pie, like Scara, like Double Lift, all of these people, Hotshot, all these people who are streamers, they were the ones who brought value to the league. The league was so badly produced that they did nothing with it, had a misread on the competitive level of the region, and so basically just damned it. And at this point, even though it has gotten better, guys, I do think LCS production is way better this year than it has been in previous years. It's too fucking late. You killed it already. You can't just sit there with the paddles going. It's not going to come back. It's not going to come back unless you do something like bringing these other regions in, which can make it a more interesting international tournament and bring in audiences that you never had access to before. So I agree if they do it.
I mean, the joke is, the other reason you can't bring them back now is there's just been so many years of all the NA pros getting their shit pushed in every Worlds. They can't even trash talk or do that, but they just don't have it in them. You've crushed the spirit completely. Like, they're all broken birds with wings that are like, I'll just stay in the cage and drink this water. They wouldn't even try and fly out, mate. You could open the door. They would never try and leave. So sad state of affairs, really. Well, also, by the way, I'll just throw this in there as well. Like, if you're gonna go the approach, here's what I'll say, because as you said, they have definitely also fucked with Double Lift. But the downside of that, Monte, is we're gonna have to wait about 5 years till he's not doing co-streaming anymore, and he'd have to be dating someone who was high up in Riot, who then wants him to speak against him, and then suddenly he'll get a conscience, and we'll find out all those cool stories, won't we, fans? See how that goes? See how it works? There you go. Think about it. Think about it. Go on.
Jesus. But yeah, it's just too late. So I think they have to find alternative business strategies, alternative production strategies, figure out ways to use their partners. You know, it also is, a lot of these issues are caused by franchising, right? Like, basically, they're caught in this trap because their viewership is going down year over year. I spoke about this last week. Literally, the same game, C9 versus Team Liquid, was the highest viewed match of the first weekend of Summer Split LCS last year and this year. Okay, so same game, same day, day 3 Sunday, and most viewed game of that weekend, both years. It was down over 100,000 peak concurrents, including co-streamers, guys. It was 262,000 peak concurrents last year. It was 149,000 peak concurrents this year. So you've seen a massive six-figure dip in the peak concurrent audience of the same game, which was the most viewed game. So they've got some very serious issues. And how do you motivate bottom tier orgs to spend money at this point in time in LCS? The sponsors aren't going to be coming back at the same value with the dip in viewership that we've seen in LCS. So they're not going to get as much money. They're probably at this point in time, with the way inflation is now, the way that companies are kind of reining in their spending, the direction of the stock market, like they're not going to be investing as much either in the league or in the teams. So you have to have some other way for these teams to make money. Like you have to give them access to some market.
There's the flaw they've got as well, Monty. They've actually not gotten even all the upsides of a franchise league, because the problem is basically the best selling point for a franchise league, if you're a European, for example, goes like this. Because you have salary caps and you have this scenario where you're all sharing revenue, it means every team is incentivized to have some form of star player. Like essentially, in an ideal world in the NBA, every team would have an all-star. That's like actually how the NBA was designed, essentially. I mean, it even started, if people don't know, like 8 teams or whatever, so it was easier back then. So the premise goes, even the worst team should have like a good player that your fans can watch. That premise doesn't work in LCS, like you're saying. It doesn't work in LEC either, you'll notice. In LEC, you don't sign Niski, you gamble on an ERL guy for a fifth of the price or whatever. The problem is they've created this scenario in the franchising in the Riot system where actually the bottom teams don't get that upside. They don't go and sign Jizuki. They don't go and say, okay, Jensen, look, I know it's not going to be good for your career, but play a split for me and I'll pay you the money. Like they don't actually have the finances like they do in the other leagues, because they don't have the same rev share. They don't make the ticket sales. They don't make money at the bottom, like you're saying. So unfortunately, it's actually making the franchising system look shit in a way it doesn't have to. Like the joke is, if franchising, as in the game, could support it, like I say, it would be better, because that way the 8th best team in LCS would have had Jensen on it. Like Doublelift probably would still play for someone, some King's ransom, and get most of the salary cap or something. Like that would happen.
The problem is that there is, I don't think, very much financial difference from being 5th place or 10th place in LCS.
Oh, I doubt it at all. Of course not. No.
So that's the main issue. So what you have to do, and why I think this is a good idea to open up these other markets, is that even if you're the 10th place team, if you have the Brazilian market because you are the Brazilian team and you have a strong brand and ability to monetize in Brazil, you can still make money while being bad, which is good, because then they'll spend more money on the talent, on developing local Brazilian talent to feed into the pipeline, guys. So I actually think, again, this will be a very, very good thing.
Also, even though we are going to talk about with Nelson, because it's an LEC topic, just as a general aside, come on, man. How many years has the game League of Legends been out now? We were doing a watch party. Some of these fucking pauses and breaks are just we're real.
Oh, no, we're right now.
There's a problem. That whole thing of like, watch out, chrono breaks. Like, motherfucker, I need chrono trigger. I want to go back in time. This is all a mistake. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing with this game?
I was immensely chrono triggered by the whole situation.
Because it's the thing. As mad as it sounds, what made me ultra, like the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back was when they came back for those like 3 seconds and you were like, oh, the game's started. Oh no, it's stopping again. Like, no,
it was just like a flash.
I know exactly, because for like 2 seconds they were playing. You could even see on the player's face, I'm not joking, on the player cams, like they got like it's like the spark of like vital life force came again, like, oh, I'm back, and then they were like, it's like, exactly. I also say on some level it's sort of triggering me. I've told this story on By the Numbers, so I'll tell you like a brief version. But basically, when I was a kid, I once went to someone's house, right? When you go to their house for like 2 hours or whatever. And when I was at their house, the reason I told this story is an example of how some people don't have like proper social awareness. So this kid, even though it was his house, Monty, and his game, he was just playing a single player game. And it's like once he died, I was going to get to have a go. But because it's his game, he was just mega at it. So he was just playing for like 50 minutes. Then I got to go. And then like, I'm not even joking. Like I was playing for like 1 minute 30 or something, Monty, and then I just heard like, oh, Duncan, your mum's here now, like you have to go, like, fucking brilliant. And I even just looked at this kid. I didn't say it because obviously I wasn't me now, I'm like Lenny Bruce and just transport like, hey, whatever. But I was just even looking at this guy like, really, bro? Like, it's even you're going to play it when I go now. Like, I can't even get some shine now. Like, what? That's what I feel like when those fucking pauses are going. It's like, can I just play the game, please? How many hours? Like, it took us 3 hours if you don't know, to do 1.5 games.
Yeah, exactly. We were just sitting there. It was just going on forever. And it's not only that, Thorin, but it's the the swap bug, the champion swap bug that's going on that causes all these games to remake. And by the way, we go into this, Wolf and I talk about this on the Monte Wolf show, by the way, if you guys want to check that out. It's on this channel. It's the LCK show as well, where we go pretty in depth on it. But effectively, it just adds, I can't even imagine the number of hours worldwide that this swap bug, it basically made live League of Legends unwatchable for me this last week, because the amount of time with the amount of games that I watch that is wasted by that bug, like the bug would last so long sometimes that if I was watching live, I would just have the live up muted on my second monitor and I'd be watching a VOD. I would get through a whole fucking game sometimes, obviously because I watch games faster than normal, right? I would get through an entire whole fucking like VOD game on my main monitor. And it's like, this is for a game that has been around so long. And Wolf and I both casted Overwatch League, which had virtually no technical issues because the engine was made in-house. It's an extremely good engine. So we wouldn't have these bugs. We wouldn't have these remakes. We wouldn't have all of these technical issues. And on top of the fact that there's this fucking pick swap bug that's causing all the APIs to break. So you can't even have the overlays in the game. So you're now watching a game where you have insufficient information to make informed takes on the game, or not as informed as they would be otherwise, as if you had access to all the information that's provided by the overlays. Also just looks fucking ugly. And then on top of that, you have this game where there's a bug that happens and then they can't chrono break it properly. And then so the game has to be replayed. It's just this game is just a fucking joke from a technical aspect. It's so just horribly made.
It's how you know, basically. It's the one thing I do love about esports. Actions just tell everything. It's how you know they didn't actually think it was going to be a game that would be played 15 years later, like they all pretend they do. Don't worry, you can go and find hilarious interviews where, like, a couple of years in, they are talking like, I'll be around in like 2050 or so. They are doing, don't worry, they did do some of those over the years. But the reason you know they're not telling the truth is you wouldn't hang on to the bloody game from 2009, would you? You'd make like an engine upgrade. The joke here is, it's like what I always said in CS4.
I don't think they can. They're too deep, man.
How many billions do you have to make before you do the upgrade? When does it happen? When does it? You think they're just waiting for League of Legends 2 at this point? Do we have to wait like 5 more years?
I don't think it's ever going to be fixed, dude. I think the game is just too fucking complicated at this point in time. So yeah. Like 20, so the year is 2030. I'm still watching like Nidalee spears and thresh hooks hit like a meter off a guy, but then snap onto the hitbox. Like, I don't want to be watching all this. And then the game just breaks. It's like, oh, we're going to chrono break it again now, Thorin. We've almost got it working. Then again, the best example ever of what Riot Games has to be what they did with replays, where, you know, in the most basic technical sense, they did add a form of replay to the game. It just doesn't serve any of the functions that we wanted from replays. Like, why is Riot operating on a cursed monkey paw philosophy, like with what we wanted esports? Why is that a thing? Well, I mean, they actually had earmarked $100 million to upgrade the engine, but then they had a surprise expense of paying every single female employee that had ever worked for them for the things that they did to them. So we're just never going to get it now is basically the answer. Either that, Thorin, or that money, you know, they really wanted to use it, but then because they're owned by Tencent, that just had to go directly into the Chinese government's pocket as a form of government tithing of a publicly traded company, for common prosperity. That's where it went.
That's also what tilts me more, though, is like, as you say, like, basically the reason why it's like, so what about all those replays, Riot? Can't do them now. Sexually abused loads of women, didn't I? Like, well, what the fuck are we doing that for? Like, but that was an option. Like, those were the two choices on the fucking tree, the branch, was it? What sort of mad fucking, like, alternate dimension are you living in? Fucking hell, just make replays, you twat. Metal in it, hello.
So I do want to get this conversation out of the way, because before Nelson came on, he can add whatever he wants, but he doesn't want to be in the middle of the minefield of the anger of why this entirely ridiculous situation took place. Which then, by the way, as a general
rule, I try not to mention anything to do with Tencent or China whenever else is on the show, because I like Nelson being Nelson. There you go. How about that? Just leave it at that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll bring Nelson on to talk about LEC and XL.
Right, we're back. Our guest for this episode is going to be Nelson. Also, definitely really far forward in the front on Monte's Rolodex. obviously another like regular guest on this show. I will say though, here's the thing, Monty. This is the only time Nelson's ever come on the show that the actual trash talk is justified. His team is actually leading the LEC. Every other time, like here's the problem: if people don't know the chronology, I introduced Nelson to like Western shows. I was bringing him on like my Chinese one, etc. He was coming on Dom stream. Everyone was loving it because he was all spicy and had all these takes. But then he made the classic mistake. Monty can tell you about this. The second you actually associate yourself with a real team that has to have results, every idiot fan's just going to be like, lol, how can he actually know anything if LNG didn't even make it to Worlds? Like, that's like the real logic people start applying. So then he came to Europe and he was like, well, I want to have loads of spicy takes in Europe. Listen, being in G2, perfect team to do it from. XL, not so perfect. That's a team that might be a bit harder to trash talk from. So here's the thing, Nelson. If you talked buku mad shit from teams like fucking LNG and the bad XL, when you're actually in lead in the LEC, you better be on your game today, mate. You better be coming with some flames today. You better be telling me today how shit Fnatic is, that Rogue's just done. Forget about Misfits, Vetio. Who the fuck are you, mate? You know, more like Otto. Come on.
So I learned my lesson when I was in Europe because like branding is more important than your actual ability. So.
Okay.
Yeah, well, wait till you get to NA, man. Then you'll really discover how true that is.
I don't know. That as well. That as well. I learned that in off season. Like branding is more important.
Well, your Brandon is talking shit, so fucking get to clapping. Go on.
Right. So we are going to give you the platform to discuss the horrific regame that you suffered with Vitality. Which, by the way, if fans haven't watched those games, well, probably the first game you'd have to go back in the broadcast because it's not going to be in VODs anywhere because now it wasn't the official game. Yep. But you guys got Soul in both of the games. You guys had a pretty significant lead.
Well. It was looking good.
Yeah, you guys had a very significant lead in the first game. Then you come into the second game, you utterly stomp the shit out of them in the early game. You get your first dragon at about 6 minutes. Then you proceed to get Soul right on the 4th dragon spawn. You have an Infernal Soul. You're looking great. Then you kind of throw the game. So let's first talk about the regame and what happened, and then we'll talk about bounties, because both of these were very relevant conversations around the world this week in terms of comeback victories or potential comeback victories that we saw and the kind of egregiousness of bounties. But first, what the fuck happened in that first game? Because it was a Banshee's Veil bug where Nuke Duck had his Banshee's Veil up, but Perks couldn't see it on Sylas, so he tried to steal the Lissandra ultimate. It got blocked by an invisible Banshee's Veil, and then he pauses the game, right? Is this what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Perks on Sylas who tried to get Lissandra's out, and on Perks' screen, he couldn't see the Banshee animation on the character, so it was paused. And as far as I know, there is a rule where it is stated that it will not be remade if it was like the Edge of Night, but not Banshees. So I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure like
what's
this
the distinction between the two? Why would only one apply?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't write the rules, so I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure the bug is known for a long time actually.
Okay, so then they tried to chrono break the game, and the game started for like 2 seconds and then stopped again, and then the remake happened. So what happened in that sequence of events? Why couldn't you chrono break the game?
I think it's mainly like we were in a different position before. Like I think before the bug happened, it was 25 minutes, but when it was chrono break, it was not at 25 minutes. You know, some of my players were losing, like ADCS was missing, some items were missing, and at first we thought it was a visual bug, so we just continued and played, but then we realized it's not a visual bug, right? So then we had to chrono break again. I think it didn't work, so we just had to remake.
And you end up coming into this game with an a very different draft from both sides. Question for you, were you given, because you had a substantial lead, were you given the option to redraft? Because I was surprised that they didn't just replay the game with the same drafts. Why didn't that happen?
I think it's in the rules that it's always a new draft if there's a remake.
Do you prefer that?
I prefer the rules to be changed, like because it was obvious that we're just gonna win that game.
Okay, well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit, Nelson, because you did in fact almost lose the next game with a very similar advantage, I'm not going to lie, is more of it says bad things about League of Legends as a game when it comes to the objective bounties, because you found yourself in a situation where you have this really fast Infernal Soul, and then some of your players decide to like run into your enemy jungle when they have 2 TPs up and kind of like int the game. And then all of the shutdowns occur. And even though gold goes back to basically even, or actually, I think Vitality ended up being a little bit ahead by the time they got Baron, you still had outer turrets up because you were just fucking dominating this game so hard that they never had pressure on the map, never were doing anything. You had taken like the heralds, the dragons, everything. You were eating them alive basically. And so there were still outer turrets up. So they get the Baron, and there are still objective bounties up, even though they're like 200 gold ahead as a team in the game, as they push down these towers so that you get fed even more gold, because the dragon soul is worth so much when it comes to objective bounties. And then it takes a kind of bad engage by Perks and good kiting by you guys for you to win the game. You still had probably a pretty big advantage with the soul and the composition that you had, but it was nearly a throw, which in some ways validates Riot's perspective of the first game without, not calling it a victory, because it was a kind of similar condition. But at the same time, it also just fucking sucks that the game decides how hard these rubber band mechanics can come back into play after really just one error on an extremely clean game by you guys.
I think after like some experience when the bounty mechanics were introduced, I think we kind of realized that every Drake has a rough estimate value of 1 or 1.5k. So of course there were like many discussions sometimes where on like whether should we actually take the Drake. It would give enemies bounties. So I'm not very sure. I mean, it would be the best if like Riot could clarify what is like the actual value of the Drake and the Soul. But I don't think it's good for the game if we can play perfect for, let's say, like 30 minutes and then just one mistake and we lose the game.
I mean, I think that's pretty uncontroversial opinion.
Yeah.
We almost saw this in multiple regions this week, so it wasn't just you guys.
But I would also like to add that in the second game, I think Vitality was, after getting all the bounties, they were 4k up, and I think we had a worse draft. So the soul, it was basically like neutralized, or we were
The thing is, though,
could be considered behind.
I don't take the regame that seriously, because I could even imagine those players will be tilted. I've always thought the craziest thing in League of Legends especially is you have to have that thing where you cannot speak at all. So if you think it's bad being a fan sitting for 30 minutes, imagine being a player who just can't speak. You're just trapped in your own fucking mind. Can't say or give any indication to the outside world what I think. I must just sit here like I'm fucking being tortured like a prisoner of war. Unsurprisingly, if there's someone then just goes, and now play League of Legends at a high level, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. I might be a little bit tilted, I think is the term League of Legends plays here. So all I'll say is this: I care more about the original game, Nelson. The original game is basically why, if people have watched my shows, I've always been slightly higher on the XL squads than other people have, because I'm a Young Buck fan. And I also think if you look at the squads, they're always slightly better than the players look like on paper. They never have the best roster, but they always in the mix in the playoffs, right? This split, dude, part of the reason why I'm actually quite hyped about XL is exactly the way that game was being played. That was looking really clean, mate. That was looking like the XL might be actually for real the best team or the second best team in the LEC. It looked really good. What do you think of the way the split's going so far? Is this the expectation you had?
I don't think it was the expectation I had, because the split is going well for sure. I just firstly, I didn't think the teams were so bad, but also it's that even though we had a good boot camp, I think most of the improvements were made when we flew back to Europe, because that's where we made changes to the way or our playstyle or the way we play. Because I think in spring we could set up objectives, but we always play for late game. We always scale. But I think this split was completely different, and I think it's something we learned during when we scrimmed against T1 and RNG. I think if you're not one of the teams who scrim and practice against them, you wouldn't realize how far you could push your limits.
What do you mean by that? Give us a little bit more there.
I think we scrimmed so many games against T1, maybe 20 games or more. I think they showed us how to destroy bad teams in less than 20 minutes. I'm pretty sure there are 3-4 games where they just beat us with second Herald. They ended the game on second Herald, and we just
And you have access to this dark technology?
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
I watched the Mad Lions game, so yeah, I can confirm that they do.
And of course, then we just learned how they snowballed the game, and basically we used it against the bad teams, and it works against every bad team so far.
So I want to talk about your boot camp, because you go over there, and I heard Young Buck on the LEC broadcast shouting you out in an interview because you have all of the deep connections to a lot of the LPL teams in order to get some of these boot camps. So what was your experience going to Korea for this boot camp, and how were you able to get all of these really valuable scrims during MSI?
I think the main thing is, like, most of the context, you either have to be able, you first you need the WeChat account there, which is not possible to create one for the past few years, and you need to be able to speak Chinese most of the time to contact the coaches there. And I think, like many of the staff, either the head coach or the person arranging scrims, I have like a personal relationship with them, so they're always willing to give us a scrim to like test the team out, to test us out. And of course, I had to arrange everything like 2 months in advance, because if you don't arrange anything like one or 2 months in advance, you're not getting any scrims.
I heard that there were actually orgs that did go for those boot camps, and they were there. And even though they've sort of tried to infer, like, maybe they would get these gear, I've heard some of them got absolutely punked and just got nothing, basically. They just took a trip, basically, and played solo queue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're the only one who had good scrims, because
I love it. What a waste of fucking time.
Gyoto last week said TL had some, got some
for sure.
good scrim brocs, but Team Liquid is a relatively known quantity with, famous players internationally.
I'm gonna help you.
Yeah, and you have so it's not you have like
exactly.
Bjergsen, like people are just going to play against you if you have Bjergsen and Bwipo and some of these big names, right? That at least they've heard of or seen at Worlds, and then you also have Core JJ to hook it up. What?
I mean, they just went there for 10 days, while we went there for over a month, and I had scrims every single day against top teams. But of course, they have Core JJ, and they are a lot bigger brand. And I know most teams, they couldn't find scrims, because even BDS and G2, they were asking me to hook them up.
G2, the team that was at MSI, was asking you to.
Even though, look, on some level, I get it. There's a camaraderie in esports. I have to say, mate, if someone said that to me from a rival team, I'd go fuck yourself. I'll tell them to doubly not play.
Didn't G2 not renew your contract?
No, they paid me out.
Okay.
Carlos is actually truly mastered being an evil, wealthy industrialist. You just pay people off. Yeah. Pay off the women, pay the men off. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah, well, it is still, even though, I mean, they paid you out, that's good. But it is funny that they came crawling back after that in order to ask you to hook them up for scrims at a tournament that they were playing in.
Do you at least like fucking draw it out? Like, oh, you must be pretty desperate to come to me for this. Like, do you at least do some of that? Don't do it all day long. So don't worry.
For sure, it was just quite funny, because I think it was the day before their semifinals, I think. And then I know that RNG was scrimming against EDG, and T1 was scrimming us. So actually, there was no team left.
That is next level though. Like G2's like, but wait, we're in the semis of MSI though. We need to actually try and win. You're like, listen, excuse me, I'm gonna actually scrim T1 now. If I have some time later, maybe I'll let you scrim. Like, you've owned them, mate. You've actually fucking cocked these guys. You literally cocked G2. Well done. I mean, some would say you did that whole year where you pretended you were going to be a sick coach and bring all the LPL picks and they had Reckless and they were going to win and go to Worlds and everything. You sort of cocked up that year too, but you got them 2 years in a row now. That's two. That counts. That's two. A nice one. Different from inside the org and outside. I like it. Well done. All
right, let's talk about some of the changes that you guys have made over the course of this year, because bringing Mikyx on was a really big shift. Were you surprised to see that Mikyx was just sitting there available basically for free when it came to the start of this year? And what was the decision within XL to bring him on board?
I mean, I was not surprised that he was there without a team, because off-season happened like really, really quick in 1 or 2 days. And he was stuck without a team. And I think the decision, so basically when I joined XL, I just told our GM that, you should it's better. I mean, I told our GM after week 1, it's cheaper to get Mikyx right now compared to before summer, because we're in the middle of the split. It's only week 1, and G2 wants to get rid of him because he's on the salary,
Of course.
So you just get him right now. It will be the lowest price you can get, and he's Mikyx. So there's nothing to discuss there.
Why did
where did you develop this crazy eye test to know Mikyx could like engage on champions like Leona? Fucking hell, you've got a deep knowledge of the game, Nelson. That's the thing I appreciate about you. You see things other people don't see. Fair play. Obviously Mercer wasn't available, so you just had to go with Mickey at that point. What else could you do, right? Bloody hell.
Maybe there's another rookie somewhere, I didn't see.
True.
I think some people were surprised. I mean, obviously, I think most people realize the value in bringing on a player like Mikyx, but some people were surprised because at least Advienne and Marcoon had come up together and had shown, they had basically last year, they had immediately improved the XL roster and made a pretty vast and impactful difference. And so considering that there could still be upside to Advienne, and especially because Advienne and Marcoon were used to working together, was there any doubt in your mind about Mikyx, or is this something that you really, really wanted to get done?
I mean, I think there's like two, or there are a few points, right? I think first point is, I think Mikyx is a lot better. I think he's like a top 3 support, and it's very hard to reach his level of play. Doesn't matter who you are. And then secondly, we could get him for cheap. And thirdly, I think like Advienne had 1 year left. It's not like this guy is a rookie with 4-year contract left. It's his last year, so I might as well get the best support in you.
Makes sense.
At least the best available one. Yeah.
With this iteration of the roster, how much of your success right now do you think is the shift in the meta versus having more time to have synergy with this core group of players? Because you did, like you said, mix it up kind of early on into the season. Now that you've had the boot camp, had an opportunity to retool things, or develop these players, because at least Finn looks probably like this is the peak of his career in terms of his individual performance right now. Like, I think he's improved a lot. Like, he's not, I think, at the apex of top laners in Europe, but also that pool I would say the top lane pool in Europe isn't great at the moment. Like, a lot of the top laners don't look particularly strong on an individual level. And so how much of it is like the meta versus a lot of the improvements that you guys have been making over time?
I mean, I don't think he has anything to do with the meta. I think if teams watch T1 play in spring and how we play in summer, they snowball slower than them, but of course it's still like at a very fast pace. And even after dispatch, there are different champions, but it's still the same game. Like, the meta didn't affect on how you can play the game, even though everyone says the game is slower, but we just showed everyone in LEC how to end the games extremely fast. And for Finn, I think he improved a lot in Korea, mainly because he had a lot of 1v1 practice with with Bin. We had our top lane and bot lane practice like 1v1, 2v2s against T1 and RNG. So I think it was a good experience for them.
Okay. Well, here's my question, right? Not based on the actual LEC game so far, based on scrims and what you think of the squad. Who do you actually think is the best LEC team?
I think the best team by far is G2. I think they are more serious in scrims compared to stage. I think they're just trolling on stage, but still beating everyone.
Do you think it says anything about their, like, on paper, obviously the year you were there, everyone thought it was going to be the super team because there was reckless angle, etc. What do you think's different about the G2 squad now to the old one? What's the biggest difference?
I think it's just Caps and Yankos are a lot happier, so they're just playing better. I think that there's no other reason. Because
definitely looks like he's fucking smurfing so far. He's having a fucking 6 split, isn't he?
Yeah, I just met him a few days ago. He was really happy. And I mean, I don't think you can say that the bot lane this year, on paper at least, was better than Reckless and Mikyx individually. But
no, of course
they were happier, and Caps is playing like 10 times better.
I mean, your only loss so far this season is to G2, where Caps just basically popped off on Ari and ruined the game. It really slowed down the way that you guys have liked to play, because you've been translating a lot, like you've been making very good cross map plays and grouping up overall. And I think we've seen you when you talk about the way that you play as similar to T1. Like, I've been impressed with the way that you've like punished bad teleports in game in terms of cross mapping and made very aggressive plays, even with, I guess, like more passive champions or scaling champions like Yuumi, which is a pick that you guys have prioritized very highly. And I think in the Mad Lions game, you saw some of the strength of using that Yuumi pick in terms of early tower dives as well. So it seems like you guys are kind of following the T1 playbook, but you're doing it with some slightly different champions and different approaches. But conceptually, I can see what you're doing when it comes to the game.
Yeah, I think like how we snowball the game, it's we just learned from T1, but of course we have different ideas in draft. And also like how we close out mid to late game more cleanly, I think it's something we learned against when we scrimmed Chinese teams, because I think the issue we faced when we were in Korea was against T1, it was we could most of the times we couldn't stop them having a 7k goal lead at 14 minutes because their top lane was just too good. I think he's the best player in the world. And but against like Chinese teams, we could be 7k up and we still cannot win the team fight. And from we learned like how our positioning is important and how to abuse enemies' positional mistakes in team fights.
Have you been watching any T1 so far this split? I'm curious.
This split we didn't really watch. I didn't really watch.
Because like speaking of Zeus, they've been at MSI as well, but this split also, they've been really leaning on him in terms of carry performances, and he's providing, like, as a top laner, like 30% of his team's damage right now. And he's kind of been the rock that they've built this year's iteration of the roster around. And it's been really successful. But I guess we haven't seen the same stuff with you guys and Finn so far. You guys have been more focused on Patrick and the bottom side of the map, providing that carry potential. Is this something that you guys have had to move, or an intentional decision that you've made?
I would say so, but I mean also from like some of the T1 games, sometimes they focus more on bot side depending on draft, of course. But and at least for us, that is our strength, and that is just something we just have to play towards too. And also, it's just easier to win through bot lane.
Are you concerned, like, if some of these champion picks, because you guys have been playing in, we've only seen 5 games, and obviously you have a wealth of scrims to draw from, but we've seen a pretty similar style in your approach so far, which has been like a priority for Markoon on being active on the map really early on. Nuke Duck has played TF, Ari, and Lissandra, so wanting to roam into the side lanes and have these pressure games early. But for the most part, 4 of your players have only played 3 different champions, and then Patrick has played a different AD carry in every single game that you've played. But it seems like there has been emphasis on Patrick scaling, Patrick doing all of these damage, or you guys making very aggressive dives with Patrick in the bot side, or if he swaps into top, wherever he is, basically, on the map. Do you feel like you have a diversity of playstyles that you haven't showcased, and you're just running this because you can run enough iterations of this kind of composition that it just works no matter what, and it operates in kind of the same way with a variety of different champions? Or do you feel like you have a depth that you haven't shown off yet?
I think we can just play the way we play with any champion, so it doesn't really matter if the champion picks change throughout the split. It doesn't affect anything at all.
Being as you just obviously played them in the epic fucking chrono broken game that we just referred to earlier, right? What do you actually think of the Vitality squad? Like, what's your diagnosis of this team? Like, I've noticed the vibe I'm getting from talking to people in the scene. It's not just the things they've said publicly. A lot of people are out on this squad and don't think it's very good, basically. Like, is there hope for the Vitality team? Can they get it together, Nelson?
I mean, I don't want to like specifically flame them, but I think
I'll do it. It's okay.
like I think the only
you're not feeling well. What's going on?
I think only only G2, us, and Mad Lions have any clue on how to play early and mid game, and the rest of the and Rogue plays like slightly differently, but I think like the other 6 teams, they don't have a clue.
Because obviously Rogue's the team you're going to play next, and they have looked a bit suspect at the beginning of the split, right?
Let me provide an example from literally the game that the second game that Vitality played against Excel. So first off, they got completely clowned in the first game. They got remade. But a really prime example of this was a sequence that happened around the Rift Heralds within the second game that they played, which is first off, like, basically they gave up almost every objective for free. But what I have been harping on this entire year in terms of Vitality is that it appears that nobody actually knows what the fuck is going on other parts of the map on Vitality, to the degree that they do not seem to communicate with each other ever. And I said last week that I was slightly encouraged because for the first time against Misfits, which is obviously not high praise, right? We had seen what appeared to be Haru, Perkz, and Alphari coordinating on Volibear invades in a way that made me hopeful. And then I watched these Excel versus Vitality games, and my hope was then destroyed because I think that was a fluke in one game, because I watched this sequence of events where Perkz is playing Azir. He uses his ultimate very aggressively in the mid lane in order to facilitate a trade with Nukeduck on Ahri. Nukeduck doesn't use his ultimate, so he's sitting on this ult, right? And then we see what happens in the top side, which is Alphari sees the opportunity in the Gwen-Gnar matchup to try for an all-in. Okay, Finn on Gnar runs down into the river. They do not know at all, okay, where Marcoon is in this game on Viego. And so they run into the river. Haru is late being into the river as well, right? So we see the all-in, and it ends up that Marcoon's already there on the Viego, and Finn dies, right? And so Haru then has to flash in as Wukong and then use his ultimate in order to pick up the kill onto Finn at this point in time. But then Marcoon is Viego, so the resets, he's already like Gwen. And then when Perkz and Nukeduck shows up, Nukeduck's able to show up faster because Nukeduck still has Spirit Rush on Ahri. And they're trying to do this fight where they don't know where the jungler is. In a pure 1v1, of course we're going to see Alphari win that matchup. But then what happens is they don't communicate that the Azir ult is down and the Ahri ult is still up. So obviously Ahri can rotate faster in like a neutral wave state in mid lane. And then they commit a fucking Wukong ult and flash to picking up a kill. And then we just see a bunch of resets coming in from the Viego. So like the planning around this entire sequence from Vitality is just terrible. And then they lose Rift Herald, of course. Like, so they lose the objective also. And I just don't understand why this team makes such terrible decisions or sequences of decisions that are so easily communicated between players.
I think mainly like they play very individualistic. Like they just play for themselves without care of what their teammates are doing. But for jungler, I think he's just getting destroyed by Marcoon in both games. And he will always be late because he cannot be the proactive one, because if he meets Marcoon anywhere in the river, he will just die because he's just so far behind because he played early game extremely bad. So, I mean, of course, that's the issue with his own pathing, which has been very lackluster throughout, like so far. But for the other players, I think they are just hyper focused on lane and not the big picture. You know?
What I hate about this Vitality squad as well, being so fucking whack compared to the names, is it's allowed all these morons who were just hating on Perkz on Cloud9 to like keep the narrative going when it doesn't even make any sense. Like, I don't know if you saw this in spring, they're all just like, "Lob, yeah, Perkz is fucking washed." Like, he's probably the best player on the bloody team. Like, what are you talking about? He does his job fine. Most of the games I watch, he's like ahead, he's CSing fine, he's getting kills. Like, he can't 1v9 the game, guys. So there was never even his style of play anyway, for fuck's sake. Like, what do you think on Perkz?
I mean, I think in spring he was the second best mid laner in LEC. Especially his Orianna game against Caps. Like, it stands out in my mind. But I think this split, I'm not sure what's happening. It feels the way he plays more impatient or like he's frustrated. But I'm not sure what's happening with the team from the outside, you know?
I asked this earlier, but go on, Monte.
I was gonna say he looked very frustrated in the game that he played against you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made the like Hail Mary play that he did, right?
I think even against Mad Lions, like when Mad Lions were doing Baron and he was just hitting people on Azir, it just didn't make sense.
What about this then? Like I said before, the next team you play, it's actually the only top team you have yet to play is Rogue. But obviously, Rogue's actually started kind of a bit dodgy in the split. Like, if people don't know, for a normal team, it's fine to be 3-2. It's not the end of the world. Rogue is a team that only ever loses 4 or 5 games in entire splits. Like, it's actually really bizarre for this team to start the split so shitty. So, is this indicative? You implied earlier, Nelson, that you didn't put them in your initial group of teams who play the right way, but you had them as sort of like maybe they sort of play correctly in the meta?
I think they just have a different way of handling like mid game. I think G2 knows how we play and they also know how to execute it. And Mad Lions have a very similar style to us, but Rogue just plays in a different way. But I think their early and mid game fundamentals are still very solid.
What do you think of the Malrang aspect? Like, is it still working?
I think it's still working as long as he has the laners he has. You still have Larson, you still have Trimby and Comp. I think you still can play that way.
Okay.
They're just like opposite version of G2, where G2
you don't
is
think
stronger
at the end of the split they'll be essentially it sounds like you're a bit down on them, but they're not as good this split though.
No, I think they are still as good this split, but I just
Could they win the split?
I still think G2 is better.
Okay.
I mean, I think the competition is obviously leveled up, right? It is a lot tougher. Like LEC is having a much better split than they did last time around, where a lot of the teams looked like they were not competitive. I mean, G2 started off really rough before eventually winning. So it just Excel obviously doing a lot better as well. So I think that part of Rogue can't be viewed in isolation, right? Because they themselves are going to have probably a harder time, especially because they started their first week was against Fnatic, G2, and Mad Lions. Like they had a really fucking hard schedule. And then, I mean, they won both of their games this week, so they're kind of getting right back into it. And after they pulled off the miracle win against Mad Lions, they technically have a winning record. So I think by the time they finish the second round robin, they're not going to be favorites against XL. But beyond that, in the next few weeks, like they play SK, Vitality, and BDS. Those are 3 of their next 4 games, all of which should be very winnable. So are we really going to be knocking this team if at the end of the next few weeks we come back and they're 6-3, right?
Yeah, I think there's
the one thing they don't do is win. Like it's only about winning for Rogue. It's not about just being a good team, is it?
I think they were unlucky to lose against Fnatic. Like they were playing well and they made one mistake and lost Baron. And of course, they shouldn't have beaten Mad Lions, but it even out in the end.
True. What about the aforementioned Fnatic then? Where are you at on this roster?
I'm not sure what's happening with them. It just looks like everyone is just doing their own thing, Like Upset is disconnected from his team, and Hylissang is basically the meta right now doesn't fit him because it's a lot of mages. And then Humanoid is trying to carry games on his own, and Wonder is trying to carry games on his own.
I'm not even sure.
It's weird how he said that, isn't it? Notice there, Monty, how he said that Hylissang, who everyone would say is like the greatest European support, blah, blah, blah. It's not really his meta, but I'm told good players, the one defining factor is adaptability. So I just do to you guys what everyone does to me all day long with my favourite players. Go on then. No, obviously he's a shit player, can't even adapt, can he? Can't he play League of Legends, Hylissang? Like, no, unsurprisingly, he's amazing on certain things, not on others, like every other bloody player in the world. We get it. We get it.
I think the question for me with Fnatic is that they've never really solved this entire year the Razork integration issue that they've had, where he's never really seemed like he was on the same page as the rest of his teammates at any point in time, which is surprising considering that he was a hot commodity in the offseason and coming off. And I think he's still an individually good player, but the synergy issues that this roster has are concerning. Especially given this length of time that they've had in order to gel. You would think that Razork would be fully integrated by now, and I just don't think it's ever going to happen if it hasn't already happened.
Do you think that have they got sort of issues in that sense at Nelson? Like, because essentially, like they have an over split now. Fundamentally, the teams never looked super coherent. Like they have mega players, obviously. These players can pop off, but they've never looked like the super dangerous. Like this team's amazing. What a unit! Like they've already had that in Fnatic.
I think Razork's play in Fnatic seems like he's just clueless on what to do. I think he's probably not the correct jungler for them, and I don't think that he can fix it or they can fix the issue. They'll probably have to wait for next year.
Basically, the vibe I get is like, I don't think there's anything wrong with his skills. I just get the vibe, like, in terms of mentality, I think it's a terrible personality balance in the squad. Because in their squad, like, I get the vibe that, like, in his, if I had to guess in Misfits, remember he was playing with a bunch of rookies, like inexperienced, but I bet he just did whatever he wanted in that team. It looked like in that team he could just have total agency. In this team, right, even before you've done anything as a jungler, you have to figure out what the fuck is Humanoid doing. Where's Illisang roaming to? Like, this is a really hard team to play in. It's not easy. It's not fucking jungling by numbers. It is a really difficult team to be a jungler in. What type of jungler would they need in this team, do you think, Nelson, to be to make them legit, to make them really good?
Oh, they just need Yankos. I
That
think
can't be the
Yankos.
fix for everyone, though. There's only one Yankos. There's only one Yankos.
I think Yankos or Malrang, like either one of these two. I think those two are like perfect fit for him.
People have their own initiative, basically.
No, like people who are willing to sacrifice to help
Right,
their teammate.
the dog. Right, okay.
And they know how to be the dog, you know. Like
there you go.
It looks like Razork doesn't know how to. So yeah.
Okay. I just think it's funny when it's silent. So
you love the awkward.
Love them awkward silence. Yeah, use it to my advantage.
I want to go back and talk about some of the patch changes that I'm sure think are overwrought, because people have been in general around the world playing slower as a result of the durability changes, as a result of the tower buffs, maybe not diving as much, but we haven't really seen any lessening of tower diving in LPL, and with Excel as well. You guys are still really aggressive in that regard and have been very successful. Do you think this is a psychological thing that has happened to a lot of regions when it comes, or a lot of teams and regions when it comes to these changes, that they're just more reluctant to pull off these plays, even though they're still perfectly doable, it would seem?
I mean, I'm pretty sure we did some calculations that most champions are like 15 to 20% like harder to kill. So basically, your execution on dives has to be more on point.
Sure.
But
what's some good examples of ones where this is like a big difference, do you think? If like someone was a casual fan, what's like an example of a lane or a champion setup that would make like you can't just gank this guy anymore?
Or I mean, it could be something like let's say Orianna, right? So basically, like everyone's HP, armor, and MR is increased, but they didn't increase your mana pool. So you might not have enough mana to kill the champion again. And this will affect like what champions are being played.
Yeah, but of course, especially because now it seems like mid lane's going to have loads of AP, yeah.
Yeah, but dives, I think it's still about laning, like whether they took bad trades or not, and then their jungle pathing, whether if the jungle is on the opposite side and you took a bad trade, then you still get dives, because LPL was playing on the older patch where the towers had even more damage and they are still diving. So there is a change for sure, but basically it raised the skill floor, I guess, for diving.
Okay, that's one way to say it made it harder.
Yeah, it made it harder. Yep.
Sure.
I want to get your take on something else, Nelson, because there has been an aspect of the durability changes that I think really, I haven't seen it discussed anywhere, but I think is very interesting, which is that because champions are generally harder to kill now, and because team fights tend to drag on for longer, and one part of this is that cleaning up a team fight. So at the very end, when one team has won a team fight and maybe two players on the losing team are running away from an objective, right, that you're fighting right there. A mistake that I've seen pretty consistently has been attempting to chase down those players and get the kills. And if these players escape, or if you use too much time, even if you do get the kill, we've seen high-level teams, and this has been really prevalent in T1's games, this split, which I know you haven't seen in particular. Even if that objective is taken, the team that lost the fight will have the time to respawn, come back, and then take like a Baron off of a dragon fight, which they wouldn't have been able to do before because the fight would have been cleaned up like a lot faster than it was previously. Have you had to change anything within your team, or if you noticed a meta shift where you just need you need to tell your players like, don't bother chasing these kills down now, because in the 15 seconds it takes to kill them, their team's going to be almost up. We're still going to have to recall to buy items after winning this fight. Or we're not going to have key ultimates and abilities up because we use them to chase these players down. And then they're going to be able to come back onto the map. Because I think that's been a really key point at high level games where I see teams overcommitting resources to getting meaningless kills and then getting clapped back and losing important objectives on the respawn.
I mean, I don't think the new patch had any effect on this. Like yes, for sure. Maybe some champions don't die or they escape with 200 health, but I think it's just a matter of like discipline, because I'm pretty sure this concept was taught or spoken about when I was in LPL in 2019. So there's like no difference.
No. I'm not. Well, okay. I do disagree that there isn't a difference on this patch, just because it does take longer, right? If you don't change respawn timers and team fights take longer, and it makes it easier to escape or drag out the end of a fight. Like, obviously, it's always been a thing as to how many resources and how much time you commit in terms of cleanup. But I just feel like teams haven't fully adapted to this aspect yet, which is making certain teams really stand out in this regard.
I mean, I'm also like not too sure what to say, because the basic idea is like you have to see the death timers of those people who are already dead, and then from there you can decide how much time you can spend to chase someone. Because at least for us, we have
but that time has changed, and I think players aren't used to that yet. Like, the amount of time it will take them. The judgment that you make in that moment where you would have had enough time before means you don't have enough time now, is my point.
No, I mean, because when the enemy dies, you can see the death timer, and there is like a specific number or a specific amount of time you need to have before 20 minutes or after 20 minutes, because your movement speed is different. Like, let's say amount of time you have to like try and chase the enemy, and if you can't, you just instantly base, and you will still have tempo or control of the map. And that is just something which the top teams know. They know like how many seconds I have to chase, like the exact number. Let's say maybe I have like only 10 seconds to chase.
But that number, what my point is that number has changed, because if you think you can, no, it has.
I mean, the number hasn't changed, because it doesn't matter how tanky they are. It's how long it takes for you to walk from the base to the mid lane.
The movement speed
or the middle of the map. Yeah, movement speed is still the same.
So let me explain why I think it's changed. So because somebody is tankier, you may go after this kill in this way and not secure it, and then use a cooldown, like an ultimate or a summoner spell, in order to attempt to secure this kill. Now, you still might break off at the right time, but they live in this scenario because you're not used to the same breakpoints. That's the point I'm making.
But it takes more time because you have to kill them. It takes longer to kill them.
You use resources that you wouldn't use before. Or you like, they escape anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Like, it's less efficient in order to kill them. Like, you may chase after them, but this time they don't die because they're tankier. And now you're dealing with a full strength team coming at you, as opposed to a team that's a player down who has just been able to base and buy. That's my point.
Oh, yeah, I understand what you mean.
Right.
I think
the key thing to remember, guys, is Nelson's whole style is to be understated. So the way he flames is he doesn't go like TSM shit. He goes like, there are two good teams in the LCS and Cloud9's one of them, and you're like, and then it's like that moment is when people think, whoa, it's like you're mathematically figuring out how did he flame him though, like the numbers mason, like it's so anyway. Also, you do notice. This is why I actually wonder how much of this style of Nelson Stars actually what he does is coaching. Because imagine being coached by him. He's like, look, in the game, all you had to do was zone faker and kill him. It's like, that's really hard. I just told you zone him and then kill him. It's like, well, I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds fucking easy. You're right. You nailed it like that. Are you always so understated, Nelson?
I mean, that's not the way I coach, but
no, I don't. Some would say it was a purely fictional reenactment, Nelson. I don't have cameras with them. It's just speculation, wasn't it? Just a fucking skit. Don't worry about it.
But it's like to Monty's point, like, yeah, I understand what you mean, and at least for many of the teams, they have a second plan on what to do when, like, you don't get a kill and you still have to waste time to base, and or you're like you overextended or you overstayed and you probably have to give up a wave or give up control on one side of the map to regain control again as a team. So
By the
like the
way,
fundamentals are like the
keep going,
same.
keep going. By the way, randomly, Monty, I made that classic mistake where I saw Twitch chat for a second, and there was a person in Twitch chat actually wrote. He goes like, "Moving on, maybe because this topic you seem bad." Like, just be fully aware you aren't the director of the show or the producer, and in no way will we moving on the conversation now because you suggested it. Like,
No,
you actually have absolutely left reality. If you imagine you are now going to dictate whether the show moves on. I've even just extended this boring topic 10 seconds more to roast you. Go on then, Monty. Come on.
There was actually a subtlety to that discussion that it took a while to
Oh,
get into.
yeah, we're trying to get to the key point. Exactly. Yes.
What's the subtlety?
I just love the Tyler 1 fans of the world. Like, why isn't what I want being done though? I'm going to donate. Move on the topic. Nelson's had enough. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, guys? Anyway,
I want you as a coach and as an enthusiast and like somebody who constantly is in touch with a lot of the other elite coaches in the world discussing these issues. What do you think, like, the 3 biggest things that LEC teams have to learn from like LPL or LCK teams? Like, what do you think are the 3 biggest lessons that you think are not integrated right now very well into the LEC? I think it's a good jumping off point for a conversation about how teams are flawed in these ways, or which specific teams have these flaws.
I mean, in my mind, it's only 2 things right now, but
right?
I can give like some examples.
Simplifies the conversation.
Yeah, or I mean, I could say 3. Like, basically, at least from what we learned is laning phase. I think laning phase, it's compared to the best Asian players, there's still a humongous gap, and I'm not sure if it's possible to fix this.
as in, even if we go to the top end, even if we take like the fucking capsules and humanoids of the world, there's a gap with them. Do you think, or just generally?
I think it's mainly top lane. I think.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not so sure because like MSI, it was like a lot of mid lane champions were very utility based. It's not like I'm playing Orianna against Victor.
Yeah,
You know,
it's true.
it's like it's Galio, it's TF, and then
Yeah.
there's not too much, or most of the Asian players are not playing for like a lane gap. They're playing to help their team. But I think the biggest difference you can see is from top lane. I think top laners in the West are just extremely far behind. I think our bot lanes are fine and are comparable to the best, I would say. I think the current bot lanes are probably the most overrated.
I mean,
in terms
I
of
will
laning
say,
skill.
in terms of LEC, it isn't a great sign that like Broken Blade was arguably the best top laner in the fucking split, and then when you got to MSI, he looked fucking average, if not bad. It was kind of whack.
I mean, you can put any top laner from the West there, and they'll do worse than him. I
All
think.
get rolled.
Yeah, they'll all get destroyed. And
why top lane in particular? Why is this position struggling so much in the West? Is it just the quality of solo queue with the top lane? Is it that top lane changes the most from solo queue to being in a professional team, that you have to learn additional things in order to play the role properly?
I think the amount of competition you have and the quality of competition you have, right? So if you look at Asia, like the LCK teams can scream LPL teams, so it's like, Deshaun or Nagari or Zeus or, Flandre. There are like so many, and all of them are just better. And in the West, I mean, there's barely anyone I could say could beat. Like I could say that, yeah, maybe Broken Blade can beat Finn consistently, but I can't say that for anyone else.
Okay.
And I think that's the difference, because you get challenged every day when you're scrimming in Korea, but that's not the case here, and you will get a lot of bad habits, especially in lane. And I think the other thing which is different, which I mean I could say we learned from RNG, it's how to minimize risk. Like there are some parts or some plays which they don't make at all because there's a chance to go wrong. There's always a chance to go wrong, and if they die there, let's say maybe they lose Elder or they lose Baron, and those are things which they are very disciplined in, and it's something which I don't see the LEC teams like implementing.
It was also amazing playing from behind RNG with MSI. They were fucking sick, mate. It was amazing.
You mentioned earlier that in your time in Korea, you learned really two things, which is like how to snowball the game early from T1 and then how to team fight late from the LPL teams. What do the LPL teams do in terms of comms and their setup that you guys have learned from? Because team fights change composition to composition, depends on your composition, how it operates, how it interacts with the enemy team's composition. Is there like a checklist in comms that they go through, or a way that you've taught your players in order to approach the theory of team fighting with their group of champions against the enemy team's group of champions?
The main issue, or I mean, the main point when I was in China is that I didn't have to do anything. I mean, I didn't have to do it. The players just know. So there's nothing to do. You just need to have a good draft for them, and let's say Wayward or Fondre, they just know what to do. They know what's a winning fight, and as long as your team listens, then you'll win the fight. If the enemy overextends like even one step,
Is that just something that comes from the more competitive scrim environment, or were there things that the coaches were doing with them in order to facilitate their knowledge? Because it feels like it's really hard to identify. I've always wondered this from a coaching perspective. And when I think about how I might coach in kind of the modern day of League of Legends, or what I think good ideas might be, I'm curious if anybody does this, if there's an element to kind of shadow boxing with your players and like doing drills where you set out two different compositions that they may not have seen before and have them like quickly react to how they would approach that situation if they were on each of the teams. That way they're faster at identifying win conditions with compositions, or in terms of matchups when they hit the Rift, without having to play through an entire game with that composition. Like, do you run these kind of like flashcard drills or anything like that?
I know they don't exist. I think all these drills or blitz scrim, stuff like that, they don't exist in China. I think
you have to understand Nelson's just going to go into like exactly. You just play scrim. You play more scrim. You have to, I want to ask this then. What about this, Nelson? If I somehow snuck into an LPL, like a top team, let's say it's an RNG or like a really good EDG, the top teams, right? If I snuck into their room and like recorded what their practice is like, and I compared it to what like an LEC team's like, is actually like the things they're talking about, is it fundamentally different? Are they like way more on like the waves and stuff? Do they talk about that in the West and the players' eyes just glaze over? Because I know but I've known people like Kelsey, etc., have been like in coaching staff. I got the vibe, like a lot of the Western stuff, you are being drilled with it. It's just they're not listening, or they don't understand it, or they get a little bit of it, and you just keep drilling them a week after week after week, and just hoping it stays in there. What would the difference be, do you think, if I could see what a session's like in LPL in comparison?
I would say like most of the concepts are already learned or have been tried before, and they tested and they know it works. It's just that the things that the top LPL teams are pushing for is the reaction time, like how fast you can identify a certain scenario or a certain map state, and you need to know what you can do. And I think this is something EU is also like far behind. Teams take too long to notice what the enemy team is doing, and they take too long to make the correct play. Like maybe I need like 4 or 5 seconds to see that the enemy is inting, and sometimes the window is gone. But the Chinese teams, they just pull the trigger instantly.
Basically, Monty, the analogy is in the West, where the coaching sessions like, yay, the cylinder does go through the circle, yay, everyone. in LPL, it's like fucking when they play Tetris, when those like high speed players like at the end they're like, you're 1 second off, like, oh, I'm so sorry, coach, I will play 3 times more today. Good.
I mean, it's even worse than that. In some of these like LCS games that I watch, they've got like the cylinder, and then they're like the square hole, and then they're just like hammering at it for a while for like 15 minutes. They're like, the star-shaped hole. They're just like hammering away at that, and then they like accidentally knock it into the circle-shaped hole at the end. Like that's how a lot of these games feel.
The joke would be that in LCS, every single block, none of them are cylinder shaped, but they just smash all the edges off until it eventually fits in the cylinder hole. And whoever gets it in at the end, that's just they just win the game. That's the LCS for you in a nutshell. Because I've always wondered cynically, by the way, like, remember back in the day, League of Legends used to be wide open. You could stall in a base forever. You could stay on the map forever. You could put infinite wards, in theory. You could have all the vision. You could do anything in the game. And then they just started making the game like as though it was genuinely like the fucking Microsoft like paperclip pops up like, oh, I see you having a hard time closing this one out. Thought about going to Baron. Like, this is getting too ridiculous. And the joke is, Monty, the more they dumb the game down, it hasn't helped anyone. They're even worse at it. You can make the game as brain dead as possible. And then they're like, but I only have half an IQ. Like, oh, give me help.
Clippy just pops up with the word bubble. I see you have trouble closing games. Have you tried selecting a full scaling composition and waiting for objective bounties? The other team will throw eventually.
and then they just click OK. And then when they
there you go.
When they go to Worlds and they pick Twitch Rakan, they just get destroyed level 1 and the game is over.
What are you saying? Bjergsen picking Zillion mid wasn't good? I'm confused.
Here's what would be my dream, like, because it actually would show what a sham League of Legends, the esport, like the global ecosystem is, Monty. All I would need is this: when everyone goes to that Korean boot camp, assume it's in Korea, when it's like Worlds, at the end of the first week of all scrims, just let me put like a truth serum into all the Western players, and I just ask a simple series of questions. Do you think you can win? Can you do anything? Like, if you just knew that before they even play the first game, half the players' morale is just crushed from like the 3 weeks it been in like solo queue scrims. Like, it's if you just knew the stories, like the maddest ones ever, I always think, Monty, is, you know, the stories where you've heard that like before they even play a game, like some top European players already going to change to this team. It's like, and then we have to come on broadcast and be like, right now, put on the makeup, lads, sell to the fans that there's going to be games, there's going to be a great tournament. Like, it's just nonsense, isn't it? It's like, it's fucking WWE, but in the bad way. It's the fucking jobbers. It's garbage, isn't it? Like, what?
Right. At least WWE is mostly competitive because it's staged to be entertaining, right? Like,
yes.
It is super fun to watch the LCS casters roll out and then try and lie about their teams, or just put the blinders on of just literally not watching any other region so they can delude themselves into thinking that it's going to be competitive or that their teams aren't seriously flawed in a certain way. Although I think most of the LCS people have just basically given up on watching any other region at this point in time because it takes too much effort. So that's as far as I can tell from watching the actual broadcast.
Like, I do get sort of a fucked up schadenfreude when the LCS casters on Worlds start talking about picks, and I'm like, bro, I was actually watching the LPL. They play that all the time, but then they think it's like, so like, oh, what is this? Is this a new pick coming to the meta? It's like, oh, you've only watched LCS. You've given it away. You've given it away. Like, oh, those are the best ones, mate. Because obviously they do that classic thing, which this is also, by the way, why in the modern day you should just own it that you only watch your region or you watch just LCK in your region, because in the modern day there are just too many LPL games. You won't even be able to feign that you watch it. There's too many. It's not that you didn't watch it, it's that you didn't watch 90% of the games what you're trying to talk about. Like, remember back in the day, like if you watch LCS, the joke is I can keep it on LCS. I don't have to watch the top 5 teams. That's it. Even then, not even all those games. I don't have to watch the top. I don't have to watch the 5th best team play TSM at the bottom of the league. Well, I don't have to. So the difference is to really speak authoritatively about those other regions, you got to live those regions, guys. You can't just phone it in. You can't do it. You can't do it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, I watch so many League of Legends games a week right now, and even then, because I'm doing the LCK show with Wolf, like most of the Asian games I watch are LCK, and I'll watch the good matches in LPL, but I have to talk to LPL experts like Dom to get like the niche picks that are coming in of games that, you know, I try and go over the scoreboard so I at least kind of know what's being picked generally. But if I wasn't talking to these people, like, I wouldn't know about some of the weirder shit that's happening in the lower level games that might actually have some validity to it, because it's impossible to watch basically everything that goes on in the world right now. There's simply too many. So 7 days a week of fucking LPL, 5 days a week of LCK. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's so many games.
I've got a question for you, Nelson. Go on. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like too many games to watch. It's not possible for one coach or even two coaches to watch all the games.
Nelson, like I said, even Dom, like people like Dom and Kadril who are co-streaming a lot of these LCK and LPL games. Like Dom is co-streaming LEC, LCS, LPL, and he's watching like some of the more important games, at least from LCK, generally speaking. He's already streaming way too much, right? Like it's crazy, and he is doing it live, which is like really inefficient because obviously, like you don't have watching live is fucking horrible. If you know what you're looking at, like what you're looking for in games, you can go through much faster. You can cut out all the breaks, like everything like that, right? You can take one look at champ select of one frame of the final thing before they actually swap champions. Be like, okay, I generally understand. I don't have to go through like 6 minutes of them like trading back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. You save hours and hours and hours of time. But even if you are doing it strictly on VODs, which is mostly what I do, I can't watch all the fucking LPL games. Like it's ridiculous. Like it's not, even if it is your full-time job or you are a full-time streamer like I Will Dominate, you cannot plow through every professional game of League of Legends. Like that is heinous. Actually.
By the way, I even think, even though it's just a pure conspiracy theory of my own, I even low-key think that's one of the reasons why all these shill broadcast talent keep telling us in the West, like, no, we shouldn't have best of threes. Because they just know that, like, mate, they're just double their workload. Like, they're just done at that point. By the way, the LCS and LEC's best of three, none of these guys better ever comment on LCK and LPL again. You ain't watching, mate. Like, you haven't even got time to watch that shit. Go and watch your shitty little CLG versus FlyQuest game and shut the fuck up. So, okay, bringing it back to the actual LEC though, Nelson, I've got a question for you. Within the mix of all the mess of the things going on in Fnatic, one player I want to ask you about is obviously Humanoid. Because, mate, his stock could not have been higher at the end of Mad Lions. He looked amazing. Everyone was basically praising him like the new Caps, but with like perks, elements of leadership, and maybe he's the reason the jungle and supports him. Everyone, he was praised to the heavens. What have you actually thought of him in the Fnatic team?
I mean, he looked very disjointed from his jungle. And I can't say for sure whether it's his issue or the jungler's issue.
Yeah, of course.
But he didn't seem to have, like, he didn't seem to perform this badly on Bad Lions. So for me, I would give him the benefit of the doubt. I still think he can be one of the best. He still can be the second best mid laner in LEC. But he's definitely not on that level right now.
Indeed.
Are there any LEC teams that you think are being underrated by the fans? It would be hard to imagine, considering that it.
I think. Sorry. I think Astralis is.
Okay.
They're like fifth best, right? I think they are the fifth best team right now.
How have they done it though? How they? Because a lot of people are flaming this roster. How have they done it? You think? What are they good at?
I think they have generally good drafts. I think adding Vizicachi, they added a shot caller, and I think Xerxes is actually one of the top junglers in the league. I would say. Let me see. I would say top four jungler in the league, and I think Kobe has been performing extremely well this split.
Do you think the Vizicachi's really questionable laning phase is worth the price of having him as a shot caller within the roster?
I think it doesn't matter because he's just a tank player. If he plays tanks, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter too much on his laning phase.
What if he plays GP?
Yeah, then that's then he's not a tank. then that's a different issue. But if he's on a tank and he goes 0-2, I don't think you really care because he will carry the game for his team, or he will lead his team to victory. And I think that is something very scary about Astralis because they play or at least the way they draft for top is completely different from every other team, and it's just a different preparation.
That is a cool angle, I have to say. Not many teams do that. Like, if you're a bottom feeder, try and get an established shot caller. Like, that could make up for so many of the other aspects. Like, especially if everyone else is going BDS style, just stacking like rookies. Like, have a player who actually knows how the game works. That could help.
I mean, yeah, they only have one rookie, I think, which is mid lane, and yeah, I think he's like average, very average, but it doesn't matter. I think Kobe is performing extremely well, good enough to carry him, and Xerxes as well.
What do you think about the support they found, though? That's fucking ridiculous. Where have they found this guy?
I think they found it in the depths of Korean Challenger.
Seems good,
I think
though, mate. He seems
He's
really
really
legit.
good.
I think the reason why he seems good is just many EU supports are extremely bad at the game.
See what I mean? I love his style, Monty, because I always wonder where's his sentence going. It's like he can never just be like, yeah, he is good. He's like, he is not good. If he was playing better players, like, would he win? You got me on that one. You've absolutely checkmated me. I can't even reply to that. You have done me completely, mate. Yeah. But how can he be good if no one is good? It's almost like philosophy, isn't it? What's great about Nelson, it's like he's hit me with Zen koans. And actually, I don't want him to explain, because I know it's the experience I have to go through to sort of formulate the question that within it lies the answer, because the answer was my own change, not an actual, like, tangible answer. It's probably similar to how it's been coached by this guy. I bet it's the same shit, but it's just Yodaisms all the time. Like, what's that mean? You figure it out. You figure it out.
I think we can agree that Western supports are generally underwhelming, but considering this guy came out of fucking nowhere, I think that's what's surprising about his performance is that he does look like he's. I mean, he also has a flashy play style, right? Like when he plays
all the champions you'd want to have the highlights on, of course. Yes.
Right, of course. So it is helping him. Like, obviously, his value is going to be overinflated because people have a giant boner for big pike plays, right?
Yes.
People love that shit. And it's like one of the more obvious ways that you can assert your dominance as a support player. And it's also one of those feast or famine champions. Like when it goes well, it goes really fucking well and you look like a god. And when it goes badly, you look like a complete moron. So there are caveats, but on the whole, I don't think that having a no-name Korean player come into a roster and deliver this level of performance was an expectation, especially not one that was just dug up randomly by the worst team in the LEC last split.
I think that definitely, like, I would say he's like top above average, maybe 5th place support or 6th place support.
What do you think of this, Nelson? Because one point I've made on some of my shows, but no one else even seems to vibe with this. They just let me say the point and then they go like, then move on there. I think it's a valid point, right? In the same way as the success of teams like the original Mad Lions squad coming from the ERLs, you know that era when it switched so that the new meta became everyone except the top teams just brings like gambles on rookies instead of getting the established talent in like the bottom teams. Do you think there's actually a world where after Malrang, after the Yongboon guy, do you think we'll actually get more Korean imports? Like for example, if what you're saying is accurate, like if certain positions suck, why don't I just gamble on a Korean guy from solo queue? Why would I go and just get like the 3rd best ERL top player or whatever? What do you think?
I think it's better just to gamble on a random Korean player compared to an ERL player. I think in certain roles, if they are still in ERL, let's say as a top laner, they are not going to be better than Wonder even on his current form, which I don't think Wonder is playing extremely well now, but he's still like, top 3, top 4 in the EU. And that ERL player is never going, like, it's unlikely to be even better than Wonder. Like, you might as well find a Korean player to flip, because Hirit was forever playing in Challenger Series in Korea, and he came to EU and was like top 3 top laner.
Yeah, he looked good. That's our spot for sure. Yeah.
Do you think it was a mistake to get rid of Hirit, even though he did have a bad spring split? It seems like Misfits just completely gave up, even though they were, I'm not going to say good, but they were exciting in the way that they were coming back into these games, and they were kind of an unexpected playoff team. They just ditched Hirit, which I thought was surprising when he could have just had a bad split.
I'm not sure, because from what I heard is he himself didn't want to stay anymore, so
that's fair.
I'm not sure what's the situation there. Yeah.
You know what I love, by the way? What I realise now, Monte, is this is even the perfect moment to do a true Monte and Thorin summoning insight moment, which is this. It's to be incredibly self-indulgent and make a point that really probably isn't worth making, but just to fuck with your own fans who watch your show, not even people who hate you. Because here's what I will say. This food for thought, if you're actually smart, might blow your mind. It might be like LSD dropped into like a fucking totally sober mind for 40 years. Or you're an idiot and it'll just pass straight by. So here's the point I'll make. You know how fascinating it is to have someone like Nelson on the show where you can ask him questions like, what's it like in an LPL scrim? What sort of players are they thinking of picking up? How are they so... You know how it gives you like all this inside info and you know things you could never know otherwise. Spoiler, that's what me and Monte have been doing for 10 years, you morons. So you know when you guys were going, they don't even know that. We've had people like Nelson the whole time, you idiot, now Rolodexes on our fucking Discord, Skype, Twitter, like, you morons don't know it. Like, yeah, we do have inside info you don't have. Anyway, that's the indulgent part. I mean, as quick as I good. I try not to, fucking soak in it for too long, but it's a valid point because I've always hated that Monte. Like the best example ever, because Richard actually did this in CS:GO. Shout out Richard Lewis for absolutely exposing what cretins fans are. Richard would literally in CS:GO go and talk to friends of his who were like the top in-game leaders in CS:GO, like fucking Sean Gares and God B, and he would get these guys who were thought to be like tactical masterminds, Monte, and he would talk to them about their teams, like, what do you do at the moment on this map? And then sometimes, as you'd imagine, he would use it to inform himself. And then he would make a comment on a broadcast. And even fans of that team would be like, what a stupid thing to say. That doesn't even make sense. Like, they would never play that way. And the joke was, it had come directly from the coach of that team, who that fan would just like bow if that guy even came in the room. But because it came out of Richard's mouth, they were also like, you could never know anything about the game. You've never even been global elite. Like, fans are so fucking off the base on this. So anyway, back to... Well, normally you guys don't get to see, which is the inside fucking scoop.
I mean, also, when it comes to Misfits, the fact that Here It wanted to leave, or, might have wanted to leave, let's put it that way, or didn't get renewed, isn't that surprising? Because here's the truth, guys. Like, after VTO's really good performance, you shouldn't be surprised at this at all. His contract ends at the end of this year. Misfits was shopping him around to teams during, because they want to get the buyout for him now when he's coming off of a very strong split. And not because they know he's going to fucking leave. They don't have the money to keep him. Like, Misfits isn't going to invest in this player. Well, they do have the money.
I know the buyout was very unreasonable, so
yeah,
I'm not sure what they're doing.
Yeah, and the buyout was, I would say, high for VTO, but so they were shopping him around to various teams. Like, this shit's going on behind the scenes because Misfits, he's not going to stay there. So like, maybe Here It doesn't want to stay there either. Maybe VTO isn't motivated this split. Like, he doesn't even have to perform well individually because somebody's still going to pay him a lot of money on his next contract no matter what, based on his performance. Like, he's going to find a job somewhere for a lot of cash. So this is why certain teams' performances are very predictable that they're not going to happen again. It's the same shit that I was talking about with Summit leaving Cloud9. People were telling me, oh, Monte, there's no way that Cloud9 would let go of Summit, even though his own performance was dropping. Meanwhile, like, I'm tweeting like memes about Summit being ejected into space and Among Us because I know what's going on inside of the team, guys. Like, I know what's happening in Cloud9. And you might think one thing about a player's performance, but I know things that are going on behind the scenes that are definitely true. And like, Cloud9, they were shopping Summit immediately after they got eliminated from the playoff, guys. Like, they were trying to get rid of him so fucking fast. So you hear these things, you hear these stories about what the teams are doing behind the scenes, and it allows you in certain cases to predict performance because Cloud9 was going to make a change. That was pretty obvious. But in this case, like, Misfits and VTO knows that VTO was up for sale. So, like, what is his motivation to continue playing well on this Misfits roster, besides providing individual value for potential teams in the future? And here's what happens,
guys. Concoct him, essentially. Like, if you think about it, if he was going to stay anywhere, Monte, better that he didn't even know there was any, like, off-season or potential get shopped. Instead, imagine getting shopped. It's like, you might get to go to Mad Lions. Oh, I could be in Wilton. Oh, no, back to Misfits. Oh, well, whatever. I guess we could do a same split. Oh, no, but Here It's gone. We've got a guy who's irrelevant now. Like, really? Oh, I get... Yeah.
It also
I'm really hyped for this one.
It also just changes team performance pretty dramatically because their motivation, a player's motivation in VTO situation, is to look good individually. And that doesn't necessarily mean, like, he could be playing for KDA. He could be playing, he could not be wanting to take risks that might make him look bad because it affects his value as a potential free agent. So, it just wasn't going to be the same Misfits this split for a variety of reasons. And if you know all of these factors that are going on, then it makes it very clear.
By the way, though, we should point this out. I want to get Nelson's take on this. Misfits is fucking bad now, mate. They look really bad. Here's the problem. Like, people are going to think I'm flaming. Like, I mean, they are a level of bad where I actually think they're down with the SKs and the BDSs at the end of this split, mate. Like, this is looking really bad. Like, this, I don't see how this turns around. It looks terrible.
I mean, at least on the VTO point, I think he I know that he's still, like, motivated to play well because he wants to win. He doesn't want to go to NA, but the teams he can go is, like, limited, right? Like, G2 will never replace Caps But Fnatic is not sure. Rogue, it's
The fact
Larson.
that in the past, a fan would think the motivation, Monty, would be to get to LCS and get millions of dollars. His motivation is like, I really want to keep playing because I don't have to go to NA. Like, I want to stay in here, and you're like, I love that. I like that. Now it's like a reverse motivation. Now you're motivated to stay. I love it. That's the shit. Go on then. What about Misfits generally?
I think it's like VTO trying to. It's like 1v9 because it's not that bad. It's like VTO and Neon, and the other three players are they're like the imposters, and they're trying to sabotage him. Those two.
I mean, all needs to be said is they even got a bloody Lee Sin game for Slatin and still didn't win. So, like, just forget about it. There are no win conditions. What's this team going to do? The conditions to win are don't play anyone who'll be in the playoffs. There you go. I've sorted it for you, Misfits.
I mean, the way this season is going, and especially like BDS was rightfully getting shit on for their absolutely reprehensible and ridiculous mid and late game decision making in the first week of competition. But they did technically beat G2 this week, although I don't think G2 was playing. There were a lot of mistakes. Let's put it that way. It's a classic G2 trap game. Maybe they were playing fucking they're playing fucking Live Sandbox, like Ari Vi comp. Anyway, it doesn't work for Live Sandbox either, but it is fun to watch. Anyway, they gave up all the early dragons, like got themselves, in the soul hole, as it were, with a composition that scaled very, very badly. But you could also expect BDS to throw, but at least I will say the thing about BDS, at least they have had a somewhat okay early game, even though they have just absolutely horrible late game macro, probably maybe the worst of any team in either Western region.
Listen, 100 Thieves watch BDS late game and go, they don't even know what they're doing. They go upset.
I mean, so that Baron turn where they literally just walked away from it was just like, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen in professional League of Legends.
It was good.
But you can't, they did Blue Shell G2. So at this point in time, there is a reasonable conversation to be had about whether Misfits is somehow even worse. Because, at some level, guys, I think BDS is actually motivated. Like, they may be bad, but they at least want to win, and they just came off of this Korean boot camp, and they do have options. Like, they can replace Xmatty with Crown Shot, which they should do immediately, by the way. I don't know why this guy is still fucking playing in LEC. Like, when Crown Shot is literally on your team, on your B team roster, on your academy roster, and you could just make that switch, seems like a no-brainer upgrade to me. But if you think about it, there's definitely a world where Misfits ends up worse than BDS, especially because BDS just fucking stole a win against G2, which should never have been able to happen, right? I'm not sure which of these two teams is worse.
I mean, I can see BDS improving. I think they have an idea on how to play mid game. It is just that their calls around Baron have been extremely bad.
Yes.
But I think
by the way, BDS should have won against Vitality as well. Like, they had that game in the fucking bag.
And Fnatic.
And Fnatic, yes.
Like, they should have had their first 2-0 week against G2 and Fnatic. But, they were very unlucky, I think. I was very sad for grabs.
You have to realise, though, the fact that BDS can beat G2 with a BO1 is why motherfuckers have trust issues. There you go.
But for Misfits, for Misfits, it's like I have no idea what their jungler is doing. I think, like, the game against us, he was playing Viego against Volibear. This matchup has been in the game since spring, and he still doesn't know how the matchup goes. He feeds a double kill mid lane, and the game is over. Like, then what have you been doing the whole of spring? Because the matchup is the same. Now, whether you can win or not level 3 is like so obvious. I'm not sure what he's doing.
I mean, to be fair, we haven't incentivized him because at the end of the last split, people were actually saying he was like a top jungler, so he's learned you don't have to play the first 6 weeks, just fucking chill. What's the point in wasting all the good games now? Just play well at the end of the split.
Are you sure it's not just the Greek websites? Or
that was doing my head in as well when motherfuckers just voted for their own countrymen. That was mentally now.
I think the thing about Misfits is they just have nothing to play for anymore. Like, they used up all their juice in the spring split. They're like, imagine being on this team. Your reward for like pulling out these unlikely victories, for facilitating VTO popping off is like, well, here it's gone. And also we tried to get rid of VTO. Like, how fun is it to be on this roster anymore? It just seems hopeless. Just seems absolutely hopeless.
Here's why. This team is exactly why I hate motherfuckers just constantly stacking ERL players, because you don't end up with anything. They are ERL players, not LEC players. Like, think about this, right? This is real food for thought, because they could have done this. This team could have added the Young Boon guy. They could have been taking a Korean. They haven't. They're just stuck with this shite. What's the point? The real problem is this, right? Every single marker suggested this will be a worse split than the last one. And the last one only was competent because one guy 1v9'd like fucking the majority of the games. Like,
and because objective bounties existed. Let's be very clear.
It was a different game as well. Yeah, exactly. It was a different meta.
Let's be extremely clear. If champion and objective bounties did not exist, Misfits would have been terrible.
Oh, they wouldn't have won some of those games. Yeah, for sure. Those miracle comebacks. Yeah.
I'm not even sure if like the other four players are, or the other players are, like whether they want to win or not, right? Because we were in Korea and we met up with Vetio, but his team was not there. So what were we doing in off season?
He was giving you their representation of what Misfits is like. He showed up. There was no one else there. Who the fuck are they anyway? Exactly.
The symbolism of that story is quite extraordinary.
You probably even said the same thing that everyone says in the team. You went, where are the others? Actually, who gives a fuck? You're the only one that matters anyway. Let's go off for dinner. Yeah. So that's what the fucking coaching staff's probably like as well. Fucking hell.
Yeah. I think Neon is good as well, but I feel like the other three players should be fighting for their lives, because you need your next contract in LEC for next year.
That's also what fucks the team, though. That's why I say all the markers suggest they're going down, though, Nelson. Because I agree, Neon's a good player, but like he doesn't have the broken jinx to pick it nowadays. You know, like even the factors that gave you the like win conditions are sort of getting a little bit worse on their team. The durability's worse. It's even worse for an ADC. Fucking hell, go on. And spoiler, Misfits is never getting to a late game where you can carry on an ADC anyway, so don't even worry about it. Like the durability won't matter, mate. It's the fact your team can't get to that point in the game. That's what you shower luck on.
Yeah, I think it's just that right now there are so many range supports that you have to have even more synergy, or your support has to be like good to win, so that you can win lane or you can survive the lane, so that you can make it to late game, you know. So it's a lot harder than, you know, picking Nautilus or Leona every game.
How about just pick a new fucking support player? Like, am I missing something? What kept this guy in the team? Like, how was he fucking dodging bullets?
Well, let me tell you a story, Thorin.
Come on.
They had to.
They had to go. Yeah, they could get Vander. They had to go get Junghoon from a Korean unknown team because he was better than all of the other available supports that they could have trialed. So I think the problem is that we've talked about this in LCS, but the support pool in the West is very shallow. There just aren't and I don't understand really why, because you would think that this is a role that you could be potentially world class on as a Western player if you were a very good shot caller, and you could learn good shot calling just by watching good teams play. Like, this isn't something that you need extensive solo queue experience for. I think that with a lot of discipline and film review and good coaches, you can become a very good support player on a global stage as a Western player.
What do you think, Nelson?
I mean, I think a lot of support players are just, I think 60-70% they're just bad players. Full stop. Like they have no understanding of other champions, other roles, what other roles should do. And I think that's the biggest issue.
By the way, what do you think about that? Because that's a famous thing that I know, like LS especially always drills, but everyone in the West always just does the whole thing because they don't know the East. They're like, that's not true. And besides, here's other reasons I've just thought of in 1 second to not listen to your point. LS always says that like one of the key things as well is like, Korean players understand other roles in the game, like especially if you're going to be jungle and support, for fuck's sake. You better know how some lanes work and like in depth, like everything, matchups, macro, like even though you would think in the West, like just watch the games, like they don't do it, mate. Like people think I'm exaggerating. There are so many players. Like the biggest joke ever in the West is when you have friends that are players, because it's like you have to listen to the fucking 20-minute sermon from the jungler guy about all the top laners don't know what they're doing in laning. Then you go to another friend who's a bloody ADC and he's like, oh, no, of course the jungler doesn't even bloody come bottom all the time. And then the other guy's a mid laner, like, well, actually, none of them even have the same vision of the game at all. They're playing totally different games. And I always wonder that. I always think like, well, how are they going to interact with each other and know what the other guy's doing when they're not even in the same vision? Like that feels like it's still a massive disconnect in the West. These guys don't know multiple roles.
like the best junglers I've coached, even like SOFM or Tarzan, they can play other lanes at a pro level as well, and if they have like less experienced teammates, they can even like review the laning phase or the game itself for them. And I'm pretty sure it's the same in Korea with like Canyon or who was it, Owner, where they can play.
Well, they did
lane.
try that. To be fair,
Yeah,
Kenyon
exactly.
did try and play it for their role. That was a thing they did.
Sure.
And I think that's the issue for the lane, for the supports or the junglers in EU. I think they just need to play other roles to understand how the game works on a like bigger or like how the other lanes work, so that they can also improve their game. Because there are so many players which I see that they just don't understand what like this mid lane champion does, which shouldn't be the case if you're a pro player.
What I love, Monte, is that Nelson essentially verbalizes what the actual actions that have allowed the LPL and Asian League of Legends to be the best in the world. But the joke is the rebuttals always show why the West will never be as good. Because what happens is essentially everything boils down, if you've noticed, to practice even more, practice even harder, do more things in practice, put even more burdens on each other. And then all the Westerners just keep going like, yeah, but then what about my mental health? And but then I would be tired. And then also like, what about my hobbies? And I have like a girlfriend, and also like I want to see my family. And plus, anyway, like, isn't that too much work though? And at the end of it all, it's like, oh no, I accept your terms. Like, you can just practice less and be worth and just lose the competition. Like, no, but at the end, I also want to win. It's like,
look, Thorin, I absolutely love the Zoomers because they're like, oh, we really have to be very cognizant of mental health and taking breaks. And I'm like, great, that just makes it easier for me to be good, or for other people who are highly motivated to be good. Turns out that people who have an insane competitive drive and want to be the best in the world at something, maybe they take a hit at their mental health, and that's just the cost of it. And that's not saying it's good, but some people want to make that trade-off, and that is in fact what it takes in order to be the best at one of these disciplines.
Dude, I'm not exaggerating. Back in the day, this is before I was on camera, when I was just a journalist who was just writing articles, doing like audio interviews. If I ever met another journalist in my field in esports, and he has like fucking, like, he plays like fucking roller hockey, and he has a girlfriend, and he has all friends, and he's like going out drinking, I'm like, you don't even have a chance against me, mate, because I don't do any of that shit. I'm just in the fucking game all day long. So every time you're out with that girl, I'm fucking watching more VODs. Every time you're out with those friends at the roller, I don't know why I'm going with some 70s vibe here, but on the roller rink there, I'm in the fucking, I'm studying, I'm in the wikis, Now, you have to understand, I understand it took a hit to my fucking life, of course. I was basically a hermit for like 10 years, but I'll tell you what, there's a reason why. The joke is, and I always say this because it's just a fucking banger line, Monte. The joke goes like this: the reason why I don't tell you guys who my rivals were, you wouldn't know their names. And by the way, I'll tie it back in League of Legends. That's what it will be like in League of Legends. At the end of League of Legends, everyone will know all the great LPL champions of the world and MSI winners. And you know what? There'll be tons of amazing Western teams and players who no one remembers, I'm afraid, because you'll just, like, remember your greatest ever performance. Like, remember that time we made semis? Who gives a shit? Making semis if you're the best LPL teams. You're in a bad world, you idiot. Like, that's the fucking gap what we're playing on here. Like we can take it back, even though it's an immature joke. I'm going to take it all the way back. The original gap that will never be closed is the Western fucking booty holes after getting blasted by the best Asian teams every fucking year, isn't it? A little gap will always remain, won't it? Exactly.
Huge gap.
Exactly. And quite frankly, I don't want that gap to get wider or smaller. Just that gap will remain. Just mind the gap. It's like the fucking, it's like the London Underground. Just mind the gap. That's all I'm going to say. Just mind the gap.
But I do think it's funny, just because like the level of dedication that it takes it's not something that you are going to be able to. This isn't a career that you take for completely stable mental health reasons. Like, you really have to have a few screws loose, guys, in order to become the champion at this level. And this is part of the problem with like Riot's disciplining, or people being soft in practice as well, because obviously, like Michael Jordan, very famous for this, but what's interesting is the Avalanche just won the Stanley Cup, right? And there have been a lot of leaked stories over the past couple of years about one of their star players, Nathan McKinnon, who has been kind of enforcing a certain level of discipline within the team. And even his teammates talk about how he's chewing them out when they're not giving their full effort during the season, and that he really is the taskmaster on that team. And they're not angry at him. In fact, many of them are very grateful, but it's just that he is holding everybody to a ridiculously high standard. He was like in their team kitchen, like he like removed all of their desserts and snacks and like prevented that like the entire team from eating certain foods. He would call his teammates fat if they started and told them to like get in better shape. I mean, sometimes that's what it takes within a team environment, and you have to be kind of an asshole and hyper competitive. And the truth, guys, is that other hyper competitive people that you want as your teammates will respond well to that.
Absolutely.
Generally.
Yes.
Like there's a way to do it where you're not a complete dick, right? Where you're not demeaning your teammates. But if you really want to fucking win a championship and your teammate comes up to you and says, "Hey, you're putting on some weight. Can you please stop eating so much fucking cake so that we can win this championship, please? Can you please get yourself in 5% better shape so that we can push our team over the top and do everything that it takes in order to win this trophy?" Then if you're a good teammate, if you're a teammate who wants to win, you will do these things, and you will recognize that this person is only saying it because they want the best out of you. Right?
It's why that famous link fucking 17-page document was so whack. I know you guys think it was just funny. I think it was whack because basically it was like this motherfucking guy's diary entry, like, "Oh, they're being mean to me again." Like I remember reading it. I even said this in the video. It's like you read that and you wouldn't even think Doublelift was a human. You'd think it was Godzilla or something. Like, "Oh my god, Doublelift's in the room! Help, please!" He's like all fleeing to underground bunkers. Like, it's just a bloody kid. He's a fucking like 20-year-old idiot. He's almost a bloody Zoomer himself. Like, he's just an idiot player. Like, if this is toxic, motherfucker, you're never gonna hang. Like, if you want a quick anecdote, right, I'll give you a modern day anecdote that'll show you that even to this day the NBA is rough as fuck, guys. Right towards the end of his career, but it was only a couple of years before he retired, Kobe, right, had a massive injury, so he was never as good a player, but he was still on the Lakers, and the Lakers weren't a very good team anymore. They weren't even a playoff team at this point. They were like they were in the Western Conference, but even so they were like, let's say, like the 14th best team in the conference. They weren't great, basically. And one time he came in when he had like an injury, so they weren't expecting him to come to practice, right? He comes into practice and all these players like Jeremy Lin and all the like newer school players who were shit players had signed, hence why they weren't great. They were all like, "Oh, hey Kobe, what you up to, mate?" And like fucking Carlos Boozer or something came like, "Oh, hey Kobe, what are you doing here, mate?" And he actually said to his teammates, for real, because this is true, it turns out the day he was coming in was the trade deadline, and he just said to his teammates, "Oh, I'm just here to see which one of you bums are getting traded today." Just said that to his own teammate. Remember, some of them are going to stay as his teammates. Like, you all need to understand, like, when you talk about winners and hyper-competitive people, there isn't any of that shit of like, "Oh, but my back hurts." It's like, the question is, who's going to play with a bad back and win this game? That's how a winner thinks, mate. A winner thinks that way.
I mean,
Because the problem I have with... Yeah, go on, jump in.
have you guys watched like the LPL documentary about EDG when they won Worlds and the coach was like flaming the team?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh,
It's
really? I
pretty
mean, you
raw.
should.
It's wild,
you should
mate.
see it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I've worked with that coach for 1.5 years, and that was like very mild already.
Okay.
It's very mild. Well,
Yeah,
as we know, they usually put the
Okay.
mildest things on camera, but
Yeah.
they're like they're not going to put the most extreme
Sure.
things. But yeah, I think it really is like a big difference because unfortunately, a lot of the model in the West is that, you know, these players get flamed, then they complain, you know, if their coach is too harsh, then they go complain to the owners, and the owner's like, "Well, we can't have this information about this coach being hard on the players get out there because it'll look bad for the brand or whatever." Or they side with the players because the players' popularity is more important than actually winning these games or pushing them up to the next level. And we've talked about this like 1 million times on this show, but also a lot of it is because these fucking nerds have never actually had a coach in their entire life.
Of course, yes.
Like if you're a professional athlete, you've been getting coached since you were 8 years old, playing a sport, and you're used to the environment of harsh criticism in order to improve. And you've seen the value and the growth in yourself. If you're some dork who's been playing solo queue alone, raging at people and never taking any advice, and you've been good enough to make it to the top of the solo queue environment, and then all of a sudden you have to listen to somebody else, it's like, well, they weren't there before. I don't know how to react to the situation. I'm just going to behave in a hostile manner towards the coaches, which is why I think people want to talk about how to make the West better. The basic thing that needs to happen is that we have to start coaching kids when they're 10. Like, if that starts happening, that will be the domino effect in a decade that actually gets us good fucking players. Because right now, leaving them to their own devices is a fucking disaster.
I also love, when you talk to Western pros and even privately, they'll say those lines to this day. They'll be like, well, why should I listen to his coach? He's your boss, you moron. Do you not understand the premise of a job? Like in your job at McDonald's, you don't go, but why would I listen to him? I'm better to do the fries than him. No, that's irrelevant. He's your boss. Like you don't even get to have a say in this scenario. Like, because what's mad is they still do that if you don't know, fans. The average pro player still enters a pro team and his mentality is, show me something and then I might respect you. It's like, I'm literally your boss. I don't have to show you anything, motherfucker.
I don't really think that's the case.
You don't show me anything and I'll be fucking bringing in fucking some random ERL player to replace you. Come on then, Nelson. Go on, rebut it all, mate.
I think it's quite hard to be like, their boss when you're earning 100K a year and they're earning like 2 million a year. It's not possible.
Well,
that's so weird. That's genuinely weird to me, Nelson, because here's why. That is exactly the reason I, in my mind, would find it easy to coach them. Because I could take this guy to one side privately and go, look, mate, if this doesn't work out, you've just fucked up your $1 million contract. You're not going to be in a good team next year. Don't worry about me, mate. I've got all this cash here as a coach. I'll be on another team. I'll be on this team if I want to be. So here's the thing. I'm not here for millions of dollars. I'm only here to win. So you get your shit together. That's why we're paying you millions. And then you see me on fucking Monday. Why would he ever be getting us to the meeting? Oh, but I'll make this. Yeah, you'll be making nothing next year, mate. So
coaches also
boy this guy from the get-go.
I'm curious what your take is, Nelson, because coaches, now usually it's not that big of a disparity, but an ultra star player is going to make way more money than his coach in any professional sport as well, right? But many of them still have the respect of, they still gain, still respect the coaches and still follow what they're going to do.
I think also, at least in the environments I've worked in previously, except Europe, like you could get fired anytime. So it's not easy because teams can just terminate with no compensation. And other than EU, I'm pretty sure every other region is the same, unless you have it specifically in your contract that the team can't do that. And in that scenario, I think like the players like contract or their job security is just higher. And you want to make them happy so that they play well. And I think that's the majority of the case in most teams.
We've nailed the problem. They're trying to make motherfuckers happy. I'm trying to win a video game. You're out here trying to make people fucking happy. Spoiler, that's not even possible, as you'll soon find out. Man, here's the thing. Mine's very implausible that I'll win worlds. Your idea of making everyone happy, that's 100% going to fail. I've at least got like an infinitesimal chance of success, guys.
Well, I think the problem is that there's kind of this weird catch-22 that occurs, which is that for highly competitive people, the thing that makes them happy is winning in the long term. But I think a lot of these players, even if you're hyper competitive, they trade the long-term satisfaction of winning, which might be kind of miserable in the short term, but they're just like, oh, well, I'll trade some short-term happiness right now. I want to be happy right now, no matter what happens. But it's not going to make them happy in the long term, and it just leads to extended dissatisfaction over a long period of time. Right?
I think it's slightly different. I think it's more like I want to win, but on my own terms.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that. I know what you mean by that, Nelson, but that actually, the problem with that statement is the second part invalidates the first part. Yeah. Because what it implies is I want to win, but only this way. Well, there was never a choice like that. You win by fulfilling the objectives of the game better than the other guy so that you're the winner. There's no like, well, I wanted to do it in sort of a cool way. Just, can you do it is the question. And spoiler, half these guys can't anyway. Because the problem is, every time anyone's ever said that line to me, Nelson, it's the opposite of what they're presenting it as. They're making it sound like, look, I want to win, but it has to be my way. And it's like, what they're actually saying is, I actually am cool not winning as long as I get to do things my way. It's the opposite statement. They're actually showing you that, like, look, unless everything basically goes exactly how I want it, fuck it, I won't be winning. It's like, well, great, brilliant, thanks for letting me know that. That's like that Reginald line he said when he was getting investigated, where he goes like, when he tried that bullshit angle every abusive, toxic person in a relationship does, where they go, look, I'm my own hardest critic. Oh, that's weird, Reginald. I can't remember that time you had yourself in a corner berating yourself to tears, so then you were just on the floor all the morning. Like, it's almost like you actually are a bit harsher on the other ones, and you just sort of give yourself a break, but then tell people the advertising of like, I'm really hard on myself. Well, tell you what, you've done a fucking terrible job with yourself, haven't you? You've been one of the shittest coaches ever of yourself. So don't really know that's the best advert. So anyway, any player who says that is so whack. Come on. Because the problem I have is this. I'll go back to the beginning point, Nelson. season. The thing that kills me is just that these are people who have no solution and they're just shooting down the only actual methods that have ever been used to be the best in League of Legends. Like if they really had an alternate angle, like they've built this whole training system, I'd be like, go do it. But as they say, they just go like, look, it's too much practice. 3 scrim blocks. What about my mental health? It's like, you can say that, but you'll never win. You just won't be the best. I'm sorry. I don't know how they think they can effectively practice and do half as much or whatever. Like, how's that ever going to work?
No, I mean, it's not. I mean, some players are like that, but it's more like, I mean, it's more like there are more players who I think which are like, you can only win if you play for me, and I think there's a lot of players who think like that, which is very toxic and is also probably like not the correct way.
Okay,
To
so
actually
too
win.
selfish.
Yep, like many players are like extremely selfish, or maybe they had too many bad teammates that they just don't trust anyone anymore, and this would be like a snowball effect.
Oh, I can definitely think, like, you just think how many years you've seen fucking the best, like, Asian support and jungle players just playing, like, dog champions with this shit meta. They don't just go, they don't do like a Halo but I'm actually the best on, like, Pikes. Just pick me that secretly and I'll figure out what to do. They just play the shit champion. They just play whatever the meta is and just win the game. Even if it's a nightmare.
Yeah, but and also like I think the difference between like let's say the West or some of the Korean teams or some of the Chinese teams is I think the coach has like the ultimate say in everything, but you can't say that in EU or NA. Like you
Problem with
can't.
that one is, mate, as soon as you loop into anything cultural, yeah, we can't fix that. Like, look, it's hard enough for me to fix, like, my own life. I can't just fix all of Western culture to make us good at a shit video game. Spoiler, I wouldn't make us good at League. I'd to make Counter-Strike good or something like, you know what I mean? Like, I can't fix the Western culture. Like, listen, I'm not Jordan Peterson or something. I can't just do that. I can't just overhaul all of the culture and whole paradigm or something like. I'm just a fucking guy on a show. Point taken, though.
All right.
Is there any team we didn't hit, though? Is there anyone we didn't hit out of the top teams? You didn't really talk much about Mad Lions overall. What do you think of Mad Lions' chances to actually, like, can they actually go to Worlds? Because they're looking mega so far, mate.
I think they are top 3 with us and G2 right now, and Rogue is very close with them. So I would say like these are the top 3, top 4 teams. I think they play extremely similar to us, but you know we just have the better bot lane, and its bot lane is just more important right now.
Okay.
But I like the way like Niski changed the team, because I think he really changed my impression of him, because I thought he was just like an above average player with a limited champion pool. But after his addition to Mad Lions, I think they play completely differently. I feel like he's becoming like more like, you know, the Perks type of player where he's also the coach.
I mean, it certainly seems like it's not just him playing mid lane alone. It's like his whole impact on the squad. Everyone looks better. Yeah.
Yep.
Everyone looks way better.
I mean, how much did you pay attention to Niski when he was in NA? Because, like, I feel like I think it's been a while since I would say that he had a limited champion pool. Like, I think that was kind of true at the beginning of his career, but he's really, like, been on a pretty steady growth trajectory over a number of years now.
I think I would say viable champion pool, you know, because on Fnatic, at least when I was there in G2, he could only play TF Ryze and Sylas. His TF is his best champion. His Ryze, maybe he wins sometimes, and Sylas he'll only beat the bad teams, and he doesn't have anything else. And then I did speak with him right after the Gauntlet game, and he said, yeah, he was only prepared to play 3 champions, and if he ban all 3, he's fucked.
Okay.
But yeah, it didn't happen, so he won. And
do you think that the time off was crucial to him expanding his champion pool?
Probably, because he had a lot more time to work on what he liked before, and I also spoke with him a lot during the offs, like the spring season, because he had no team, and you know he's one of my friends, and I just told him like, yeah, he also had to work on actually trying to be like the hard carry of the team when you play like mages instead of only roaming, because that won't be the meta forever. And I can see that he was working on it during spring season, and I think it also resulted in him like learning more champions.
That's fair. That's good insight. Because I mean, he has looked strong since he's come back, and he fits very naturally.
Well, two of those champions are in the pool anyway, so he's sorted, didn't he? No problem.
Well, he fits very nicely in with the way that the other Mad Lions players have liked to play traditionally, which they obviously didn't have with Reeker on the team. He seems like a very natural fit.
As far as what I know, before it was Elder doing the shot calling, and when Reeker was on the team, and when Niski joined, they shared more responsibilities, and I'm pretty sure Niski has like quite a big effect or impact on how they play the map or how they play early and mid game right now. Which is why I think like they also look like one of the strongest teams, especially when they snowball the early game.
Sure.
Also, just going to say, maybe that whole spring split off was karma from sort of low-key snaking upset during that whole drama, where he sort of like appeared to take Adam's side because they were both getting kicked from Fnatic and not going to be like, all I'm going to say is, the universe, when you don't have anyone's back, Niski, no one's going to have your back. A little bit of food for thought for the kids out there. You know, just saying, it's my message of the day. Sort of like Jerry Springer, bringing it back.
All right. Well, you want to head on to viewer questions, Thorin? All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Nelson. Very insightful. Congrats on XL doing so well. We're going to take a quick break, guys. When we come back, we'll do some viewer questions.
Right, we're going to do the viewer questions now. So explain, how does one ask a question, Monte?
We won't get existential on that, but you go to the Insight on Esports Discord, and if you hold 25 grog coins, there's a grog coin lounge. There will be a pin post in there about how you acquire your coins of the grog variety, and then there will be an SI questions thread made every week where you guys can ask the questions.
Once you're in forever, basically. Well, as long as the platform exists. I will add that caveat. I can't guarantee the internet will exist forever.
Right. And obviously, like, if we stop using the grog coins, we would tell you on the Discord first so that you could sell them before we did that. So we aren't going to be, it's not a pump and dump scheme, guys. You will get to dump first. I promise you that. But we've been using these. We will continue to use these also at a great value right now. Here we go. SI questions. Some of my best memories as a Korean child was playing custom maps in StarCraft and Warcraft 3, which encompassed just about every game genre, RPG, MOBA, tower defense. Yep, those were great. In which players, let's see here, degenerate strip games in which players work in tandem to clear various missions, and each success would lead to the removal of a pixelated garment from a woman on the minimap. They were quite creative. Having played League for nearly a decade, I'm quite bored of the existing modes in the client. Why wouldn't Riot allow similar things for League of Legends? Is it actually wise of them in the long run to limit the number of game modes? So there's several reasons. The game is built on crap code, unlike those other games that had their own engines that were built off of them. I mean, technically, League is complicated. I'm not going to get into what the actual engine of League is right now, but let's just say it was made very badly, to be brief about it. And it was built off of some really shit existing code. And so I don't know if they could do that, number one. Number two, we've actually seen a lot of those game modes. Arguably, Blizzard made a mistake because so many of the MOBAs was basically built off of the Warcraft 3 engine for Dota. And then Blizzard mega fucked up and didn't make Dota 2 themselves. And Blizzard is very aware of this, by the way, guys. From my time with working them, talking to a bunch of people there, they are so aware of the lost opportunities that they have had in terms of owning developed games that are developing or working with these community developers, bringing them in, because famously League of Legends was built by one of the first hires was Ginsu, one of the guys who was responsible for balancing Dota in Warcraft 3. They brought him in to design stuff for League in the very early days. So, maybe Riot doesn't want to deal with that. Maybe they would, because there's tons of concerns if somebody actually built a good version. But my sneaking suspicion is that it's not actually possible because League is built on shit code. That is my guess. That is my guess.
This is actually a point that I thought was a very shrewd point. I think it was actually the now sadly deceased In Control who made this point years and years ago on like a state of the game, unfiltered type show. He basically made this point, Monty, that one of the things he thought actually made StarCraft 2 not as popular as it could have been is that's the thing in StarCraft 2, they didn't have that whole arcade thing when it launched. It didn't have all the custom gear. Because if you don't know,
it was terrible, by the way.
Half the time when you played old school games, you didn't play like you were just a shit version of a pro on a ladder, like 1v1, it's competitive and the ladder. You just played the game for fun. You played in this like very light-hearted manner of like you find a server, there's someone in the server, you play them 3 or 4 times in a row, or in this case, you're dicking around at night, you play a custom mode that you've never played before with random people. Essentially, the key aspect that they've nailed here that they haven't done in the modern esports games is the modern esports games genuinely acts like your dream as a child is to just play basketball in like a full 5v5 game and be Michael Jordan. No, your dream is to go to the park and just play shoot around or play a game of horse or something. Like, you can't play a 5v5 game as a little kid and that's it. It wouldn't even make sense. But that's what esports games do. It's why I've always thought the biggest flaw ever was this stupid notion that like you have to play the same game that they do. Like, no, you want fun game modes for low-level players. Casual play. It's also a great way to get people into games, by the way. There's another reason why these games used to be played, if you remember, Monty. Because back in the day, if I don't play Warcraft 3 and you play Warcraft 3, even if we're friends, we can't play 1v1 because you'll destroy me. But here's the thing. If we both happen to just have StarCraft installed, we can go and play one of those stupid modes where it's like 4v4, like ridiculous.
Also just a nice break. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times I spent in my childhood playing these games, especially with friends, man. They were fucking great. Like Footman Frenzy, like a lot of the old Brood War game modes, like so awesome. And like, it's really good to have a sandbox. I mean, Overwatch has now done that. Like Overwatch has a sandbox mode where people can create games. It's not obviously as robust as it was in some of the RTS games, because the RTS offers like a lot of different game modes that you can make using the engine in pretty simple ways. So unfortunately, part of the demise of RTS has also been part of the demise of community game making, which sucks. People talk like, I mean, I would love to have a new RTS game that is world class, but people can bemoan the lack of RTS, but it also has a knock-on effect of we have to understand that out of these RTS games came many modern types of games that you play competitively. And so without this sandbox for people to play in or for people to design things in, we just don't even have that either. So fucking sucks, honestly.
I'll also throw this last one in. Obviously, we're talking about more like an arcade mode where anyone could design the map and the custom games. But I'll just say on the Riot angle, because obviously Riot think they have to do everything themselves. All I'll say is this. There are only 3 games Riot has ever made, and they copied all of them from other people's games. So they're not really the most creative guys in the fucking field, are they? They've copied someone else's MOBA, someone else's Counter-Strike tactical shooter, and someone else's auto chess. Like, they're not really the guys coming up with all crazy ideas. Oh, they are, but they just don't ever make the games.
They also are, just as a company, they reject independent thinkers because everybody in that company is incredibly conflict averse. And so because they have a very cultish Kool-Aid drinking culture, and they have a bunch of people in positions of power where if they are disagreed with, will just eject you from the company. And it's happened time and time again at Riot that, there aren't people who are really independent thinkers a lot of the time working for Riot, especially if you're somebody young and coming in at a lower level. Whereas if you have a map editing tool, you can just do whatever the fuck you want and present your ideas, right? Whereas Riot itself is very cultish. And in my experience, and in the experience of many people that I know on the design teams, is not super friendly to people who have independent streaks.
By the way, at the moment, you can play the World's Prediction Series 2 competition from Esports Bet. It includes LEC, includes the LCK, includes LPL. Spoiler, it includes most of the League of Legends tournaments, CSGO, Valorant, FIFA, Rainbow Six, all the Dota 2, everything. Every game that Riot stole a game from, they've got the original version of that game. It's probably on there, and you can bet on the games in that, or you can bet in the shit Dota clone that is League of Legends. So obviously, it's a free-to-enter competition. Use the link below. Go and sign up. They'll give you some tokens to play with. You can log in each day and they'll give you another 1,000 tokens to a cap of 5k. It's basically free to enter. Just give more chances and then go make a bunch of bets, see how you do. It's a massive prize pool. We mentioned some of it earlier. We'll mention it on future episodes. Back to the questions.
That's right. Also get advice on competitive edge on this channel.
Which, by the way, listen, normally I'd like to undersell things, but I will say, man alive, we have almost just been tripping over and killing the fucking game. How many of those do we get right? It's mental, innit? Like, they actually did a little graphic during our watch party. Like, I've done something like double the amount. Like, I've won like 37 and lost 17 or something ridiculous. Yeah. It's mental, innit?
It's been really good, especially this last week, too. Out of the upsets, like the 4 upsets we discussed on the show, we got 3 of them correct.
That's fire. And these are upsets,
which, by the way,
guys.
these were like 2-1 or 3-1 odds. Like,
remember, they're telling us mathematically these teams aren't going to win, so we killed those ones. Anyway, whatever. By the way, those episodes will be on this show, so just make sure you subscribe.
How to tell bad writing from great writing. What is bad writing and why is it bad? I've had someone defend bad writing as okay if it brings joy. Okay. So talking about bad writing. So here's the thing about art is that good art will lead to revelations of profound, timeless truths, and it will reveal them in a way that is unique and effective in a manner that hasn't been done before. Would be, I think, a simple way to put it. If it's like very derivative or is based off of platitudes or is done in a way that's been done 1,000 times before, then it's not particularly good art, right? Or if it uses logical fallacies or tropes like Deus Ex Machina that are really ham-fisted, it has to be done with delicacy and sophistication, right? And I think that for me, that's what really defines great art. And yes, you can like bad writing, right? Like I've said this a million times, but my name is MonteCristo. I don't think The Count of MonteCristo is the greatest book of all time. Like it's like pop culture of the 19th century, right? I just personally find it entertaining, but I'm not here to defend it as revealing profound truths about the human condition. It's certainly it's pretty good, but it has a lot of flaws, right?
I mean, to me, the answer is pretty simple because basically the problem you're going to have in the modern days, people are going to hit you straight away with all the fucking moral relativism, essentially. So they're going to hit you with artists, beauty is in the eye of the beholder,
tiring.
and it is very subjective. I don't think it is. I'm not where Monte is basically. I think the old ancient Greeks nailed it. The good, the true, and the beautiful are the same thing. They are just different aspects of the same thing. So basically, the question is very simply answered. The question actually is just how do you acquire a taste for good writing? The same way you acquire a palate or a taste for anything. You develop it. You start with the things people recommend are very good. You see, do you like them? Can you understand them? Can you appreciate them? Gradually you expand out over time in the same way as you could learn to appreciate wine or music or dance or a sport. In the same way as when you follow league, you couldn't just watch a league game and get anything meaningful out of it in the first ever viewing, but you watch 1,000 league games and you'll watch the best game ever when Rocks Tigers play T1 or whatever. It'll be incredible to you. So the same thing. So that's why I've said, don't worry about that. Anyone who's if you've already read loads and something isn't good writing to you, but someone's trying to spin you no, but here's why it is good writing. All they're doing is showing you the art of fucking rhetoric. They're just trying to trick you. And spoiler, that person probably try and fuck you as well. They can talk you into reading some shite book. They can probably fucking get your pants down as well. So I'd watch out if I were you. Just trust. Essentially, just put in the hours yourself. Also trust yourself. Genuinely, if you think something's good and you've actually you enjoy it for the reasons I say, you find it good, true, or beautiful. I don't care what someone else says. Fuck them. How do they know? Trust yourself that you know better than them.
And also just be, you could read, if you'd only ever read one book, it would probably seem quite profound to you because you don't have anything to compare it against. The only time you can know what is good art is by extreme exposure to art and seeing, is this derivative? Is it phrased well compared to other works, right? So it's a process, right? And also the more exposure you have, the more you're going to understand what you find to be profound or to be life-changing. And then you're going to find probably more and more niche works of art that satisfy that need, or because you've been exposed to so much, you might have to move into niches that you haven't before because that's the only place you can find profundity at that point in time, right? That's the only thing you can find something fresh is not in the mainstream work of art that may be an excellent work of art, but you've interacted with that piece of art, and now it's time for something else. And there's only so many like seminal works, right? And you can always go back to Shakespeare and find a new experience. I think that's the thing about amazing works of art, is you could go back to them an infinite number of times as you grow as a person, as you age, as you have different life experiences, and there's always something new in there that you haven't seen before that will inform your life in some way. A lot of great religious texts are like this as well. But in the end, like, it's going to be a very personal journey. Now, the difference is that bad art is pretty easy to recognize after a certain point in time. So if somebody's telling you like some fucking trash is actually good, that's just objectively not true. And if somebody hits you with the like, well, art is just opinion based, no, that's you know, if somebody has an expertise in something or a wide ranging palette, right, because they have had so much experience with something, you know, you're not going to be able to appreciate a Michelin star restaurant if your standard is a fucking grilled cheese sandwich. Grilled cheese sandwich is fine, right? Like, I'm going to make that for lunch, but I'm not going to hold it up as great art of food, right? A great piece of cuisine. And so, unfortunately, like, if somebody tries to convince you that all art has the same value, they're just a fucking nihilist, honestly. Like, and you should stay the fuck away from them, because there's nothing look, we live in a cold and uncaring universe, and you have to be able to find value, because otherwise you go insane. That's all I'm going to say.
I'll just disagree with the last point, though. Even though obviously you're welcome to your opinion, I will just say that's exactly why you want to search out what is good and true and beautiful, though, because that is actually whatever good in the universe shining through the cracks of the darkness. So seek that out. It's actually life-sustaining. By the way, there's even a good angle. I'll tell you one thing that'll tell you if something's good writing or not. How it actually makes you feel and what impact it has on your life. Not in the moment did I enjoy reading that, but like if it has a profound effect on you, probably there's something crafted there, isn't there? Hopefully it's not just pure fucking shenanigans and sophistry. Hopefully it's actually touched something real.
I like this name, Architect of Korean Esports Based Joe, which of course is referring to Joe Marsh, the Lord and Savior of Korean esports. Would 20 of you be able to beat Prime Mike Tyson in a fight? What would be your approach? No weapons allowed, but no restrictions on moves. Okay, here's the thing. I actually I have spent years doing kickboxing, so I do know what I'm doing. Now, obviously, Mike Tyson would have significant skill and weight and strength advantage on me, but guys, Mike Tyson can't beat 20 of anybody in a fight. That's just fucking impossible.
Very naive question. Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you guys think fighting is like, but like, even if you are a highly skilled martial artist, if somebody has 70 pounds on you, you're probably not winning that fight. Like,
by the way, the stupidest scene in every action movie is where someone beats up multiple assailants simultaneously from different angles. That doesn't happen in real life. Like, in real life, there's a reason why that video gets to the top of Reddit where a guy randomly fights off two people once. Like, because that is so rare that that's going to happen. So the idea 20, genuinely 20 of any person could beat Mike Tyson easily. Yeah. Easily. The irony is you've actually naively backed into a question that Gabe Newell once said about Counter-Strike. Gabe Newell went to a fucking IEM World Championship in, like, I think it was 2011 at CBIT, and he was asked about Na'Vi, who was the best team in the world at the time, and his answer for real was, he said, I'd love to see these guys against the public. Like, how many people do you think it would take to kill one of them? And this is in Counter-Strike. It's like, bro, you are aware someone can shoot you inside the head with one bullet, you die. Like, it's over. Same principle in fighting. You could be Mike Tyson, but if the guy comes from behind you, here's the flaw that fans don't know. Fans really believe all that movie shit that, like, inside a fighter's brain, he's like, oh, I should really just be knocked out now, but I just have too much heart. Like, no, when you get hit on those nerves, your brain goes off. It turns you off to keep you alive. If you keep going, you'll be dead. So,
right. And you can also tell people who have never been hit in the liver before, because, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't fucking matter how good you are. If you get hit there, you are going to be on the floor. Like, that just fucking doesn't matter.
Mate, the worst one in MMA, genuinely, because it just doesn't pass the eye test if you never felt it, is getting leg kicked. It doesn't look like anything. It looks like what's a big deal. Every one of those really hurts. The guy's fucking shin is going into your muscles.
They fucking stack as well. So if you get kicked in kickboxing, if you get kicked in the leg, even kind of like not very hard, but you get kicked there 5 times in a row on your thigh, like, you can't walk. And it just sucks. You can't move. The other thing about Mike Tyson is he fights within certain rules. Like, he doesn't know how to kickbox, guys. Like kickboxing, boxing is a very strict discipline that does not include any ground game. It doesn't even include stand-up grappling like Muay Thai. So he doesn't know how to do clinching. Probably
he's saying this, that there's no. I know he said no weapons, but he said there's no rules. Can
restrictions on moves. So like kickboxing, you would immediately
just gouge his eyes, fucking rip his dick off. Come on, mate. That's
the thing. Is like, and the thing about kickboxing is like it doesn't include ground game. So even though I've done a lot of Muay Thai, right? I don't have any ground game, guys. If you get me on the ground, I don't fucking know what I'm doing, right? Like, because I pursue it as a sport, and within that sport there are rules. But even for me, like if you've actually been involved in a martial art, as I said earlier, like I could be a worse fighter from a technical perspective, but if some guy weighs 35 pounds less than me, there's no chance he's coming back on me, because he would have to be so much better than me, because he just can't block. I'm too heavy. Like he can't block my punches. I probably have a reach advantage on him. If I can literally just run up to him and grab him and be stronger than him. And like it's very, very hard to win in a fight if somebody's substantially larger than you. Even if they don't know what they're doing.
That's why in the UFC they created the obsession around who is the best pound for pound fighter. Because spoiler, the best fighter is nearly always just whoever the heavyweight champion is. As Monte says, he would just win in a street fight with no rules. Like he would just win, because if he could just sit on you for a start off, couldn't he? Like you wouldn't be able to do shit to this guy. You know?
Well, it's even just like blocking punches, Thorin. It's like if some guy, because the way that you punch properly is you're putting a lot of your body weight into it, and like you're just not strong enough to block these punches effectively. If you try and block them, you're just going to punch yourself with your own hand, right? So, it's the whole thing is fighting. Don't get into fights, guys. Like the thing about martial arts is once you start fighting, you realize very quickly how much you don't actually want to get into a real fight without rules, because you could die extremely quickly for really stupid reasons. You just fall over, hit the back of your head, and you're done, right? Or you realize like it doesn't matter how much skill I have, if this dude weighs 70 more pounds than me and has 5 inches on me, I'm just fucking done. So don't fight. Fight for fun in a controlled environment as a sport. What would you recommend is a good way to get a liberal arts education without going to college? Well, that's a Thorin question.
The library. It's free. Don't know if you know this. And in fact, it's another thing. I won't tell you where to get it, but if you know where to look, you can also get any book you want pretty much online, potentially for free. So like that's the thing, you're in the information age, for fuck's sake, mate. There has never been a better, easier time to get all this info just direct in your house without even bloody leaving. So I would just say the same thing. By the way, the number one secret in life, in my opinion, is just having curiosity. If you have curiosity, I always say it like this: instead of feeling like you have to push yourself there, it's like you're being drawn there. You're the moth to the flame. You want to know more about this thing, to experience more of this thing, to get better at this thing. So I would just say, if this is the field you're into, get out a very simple philosophy. Get out a book on Aristotle. Get out a book on basic understanding of Shakespeare. Get out a book on, like, I would pick one of the more modern poets. You're not going to enjoy something from fucking 18th century or something. I'd pick something like Walt Whitman or something. Pick sort of fucking something like a war poet or something that you might be able to just get into because you know the premise, Simple things like this. Just start there and branch out. By the way, one of the best things about the internet in the modern day as well is they've mastered the algos. So the best thing's going to be, once you buy a bunch of this stuff from whatever faceless store, Amazon or wherever you buy it from, the algorithm is going to get really good at recommending the next thing, or these people also bought this. You'll quickly find, you'll branch out and you'll find your way to what you need, I think.
So the other advice that I always give to people in this situation is, and this is another like book recommendation, is I said this before, but there is the former head librarian of Congress was a man named Daniel Boorstin. And Daniel Boorstin had a fucking insane mind where he could basically understand all of these threads of Western history. And he wrote 3 books called The Discoverers, The Creators, and The Seekers. And The Discoverers is about the history of Western science, starting with like the earliest days, going through almost the modern era. The Seekers is based off of philosophers, and The Creators is based off of writers, artists, and musicians. And so basically in these 3 books, he gives you an insane overview of the history of Western like science, thought, religion, philosophy, right? And here's the thing. You could read a chapter of this book, and if he'll talk about Aristotle at the beginning, right, of the Seekers, and if it interests you, he'll be like, here are the books where it's from, and you can just go read those books. It is literally the single fucking best crash course in well-rounded liberal arts education. It's very entertaining to read. These books are mega, guys. And if you don't have time to go to college, or if you have a college degree in a scientific discipline, these are insane. They're so fun to read, and you just bounce off and explore whatever musician, artist, religious text, scientist that you're interested in. You just go find that. It is the foundation of liberal arts education distilled into like 3 books. It's fucking amazing. Very, very good. What are some of the worst roster moves that almost happened? Oh, I don't know.
Almost happened. Let's see if we can think of like one fun one though. Let's think of a good one. Let me think. Cause I've heard some fucking bad ones over the years. I'm trying to think who's really whack, who's almost in teams. Let me think. So I'm trying to think over the years. I've heard some mad ones from teams like TSM. I'm trying to think what the maddest ones would be though. Fuck, like what would be a really bad fucking move? You don't have one for like LCK or anything? A famous one that almost happened? There've been some mad ones. Here's the sad thing. The saddest thing of all is the LPL is really weird because the LPL's the league where it's the opposite. All the moves that almost happened were the amazing moves and they never bloody end up happening. Like Jackie Love goes to RNG to replace Uzi.
Yeah.
Like the ones that you really want never happen in the LPL. It's the other way around there. The joke is I think half the LPL ones were kind of shit. I'm trying to think of a good Western one though. Let me think. I mean, people might know some of the ones that they've heard of already. Like, there was that story years ago where, like, fucking Forgiven was going to go and... Think about this. Think about how stupid an idea this is. They were going to put Forgiven in the place of Doublelift, who they've just kicked out for being too toxic. And luckily... It only didn't happen, as far as I remember, because they wanted Forgiven to try out, and because Forgiven's Forgiven, he was like, "Oh, like," and he wouldn't do the tryout.
I mean,
yeah, you had to just give him the spot, sight unseen. That's who he is.
The joke is, without even knowing it, certainly some of these would probably involve Dardoch. There's probably like 15 that involve Dardoch.
Sure.
Going somewhere and then not, because he eventually made it through like all the teams in the LCS. So given his skill level versus his ability to operate as a human being, there must have been a bunch of ones that could have happened that were terrible with him. I don't know. Has the statute of limitations passed on the TSM Dignitas incident from Season 2 Worlds? And can you two comment on that and the Frost Woong incident?
What is there left to comment on? All that happened was someone just accidentally leaked a strat and then the other team heard and then
Yep.
By the way, here's the part they don't like to say because they all claim, "Oh no, Dignitas, we were amazing in scrims, like we were so fucking good." You weren't going to win anyway. Shut the fuck up. Like that angle is so overblown. It's meant like, oh, yeah, even if you'd have made it out of the round of 8, every single team in the playoffs would have dusted that team straight off. Come on,
go ask Dominate on his stream. Like he can probably answer that.
I'm pretty sure he's told the story on the Crackdown like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. And then the Frost Woong incident. So look, all the teams were doing that. I don't know what to tell you.
They always bring it up as just Woong. In fact, TSM fans have the gall, by the way, to be like, "How dare you?" You know, TSM players were actually fined as well. I'll go look it up now, but I'm almost certain some TSM players also were fined for the same incident in Monte.
The problem,
look at the screen. It was like right in the middle, right?
The problem was Riot was fucking stupid and had producers that had never worked on esports before, and they didn't realize that they can't put the players in a position where they should be able to see the screen. Okay? It was Riot's fault. Don't blame the players for that one. All of the players were going to do that. You just can't have that situation develop. That one's on Riot. So
there's no extra juice on it. Those stories are just both known. I'm not really sure what you're hoping for on that one.
We've established that Thorin is esports. Monte, what are you? I don't know, man. I don't know. Still here in esports for some reason.
You know what's funny, Monte? All I'll say is this, and when I say this one line, it makes everyone look like a fool. In the same way as I've always thought the biggest cell phone ever is whenever everyone says that line, they go, "Ha! Call yourself the esports historian." The fact you don't say a name instead means I am. Exactly. It's the same principle. Notice how when they told me I'm not esports money, they didn't have anyone else. They didn't have a go-to name that was esports. then I am esports, aren't I? So there we go, QED. What would you say you are?
I don't fucking know, man.
If you had to, fucking condense yourself down to one principle, what would you represent?
Well, what's on my Twitter right now? Esports Knight Errant. I think that's pretty good. I move around the scene from scene to scene, doing good works independently on my own due to my own code of honor. That's me. Because if you guys don't know, like the concept of the Knight Errant, like back in the day, is basically a noble who would follow the code of chivalry and kind of just wander around the countryside doing good works as they struck him and like go on quests of his own volition, right?
By the way, my favorite thing about the people being mega triggered about that I am esports tweet is it actually just shows why modern people are incredibly stupid, because they cannot operate mentally beyond the literal level, Monte. So most comments I saw were like, oh, so you're the only person who's esports. What? So no one else is esports. So you think you're more important than boxer? And like, no, I never said any of that. I said I am esports. By the way, never said esports is one person. I am the essence of esports. By the way, someone giving 20 years of their life to a game when you make no money and battling, I think that pretty much is the essence of esports, you stupid fucking idiots. The joke is, just like with the esports historian one where they go, so you called yourself it. And I always say, I didn't. Actually, a man called Simeone from Face It in something like 2013 called me the esports historian. But in explaining esports history to you, I've just shown you that you don't know esports history enough to make a judgment on who the historian is. So same thing. If you don't know why I am esports, all you've shown me is you definitely aren't esports. There you go. You like that one?
And as far as I know, you have more esports in your brain in terms of the history of it, multiple games, years and years of experience than anybody else. So you are more esports than anyone else I know.
Here's a joke for you because it's funny. Another classic pea-brained NPC take was this, Monte. They go, esports historian. Anyone can just look up a wiki. Right, A, those wikis didn't even exist over 10 years ago, you moron. And B, when they literally invented a Counter-Strike wiki, one of the first things they did was come to me and beg me to write as many things in it as I could. And I told them, sorry, I don't have time. Well, why would they do that if anyone could just read the wiki? The joke is I basically wrote the wiki, you moron. I didn't literally in this sense, but you get the premise. Like, you've missed the point completely, haven't you? Yeah, exactly. I know. Come on, mate. The joke, here's the premise, right? Here's why I am esports. Because I am the only person ever, I don't even care how egotistical this sounds, out of everyone, if you had to pick one, if all of esports history was destroyed and actually erased, if you had to pick one person to survive and piece together as much as they could from their brain, you would pick me in a heartbeat. That's one thing I don't even need. It's not even debate on that one. I could fucking construct most of it.
Let me put it this way, guys. If all here's the thought experiment. If all of esports was going to get destroyed tomorrow, and we could only put one person in the nuclear bunker to recreate esports, we would definitely put Thorin. That's it. It's not even a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not even a fucking conversation.
And by the way, that's not some sort of arrogant thing in the society. I'm some brilliant person. I put in mad hours to this shit. I have literally put in decades of my life on Wikipedias and shit, for fuck's sake. So don't worry. Yeah, I've got it all squared away. Anyway, what's the next question? Come on.
This is a good one. You have been given infinite resources and a time machine to recreate any film of your choice. It can be a film you liked that you could make even greater, or a subpar film that you wish lived up to its potential. Which film do you choose?
We can just tweak how we want the movie to be, right?
So, so I guess the question is, like, do we pick a good film that with money could be made better, or like a kind of shitty film, maybe because it had bad production value, but like kind of a good underlying concept that could be made better with infinite money?
I mean, an obvious one under those parameters would be like take a movie, for example, maybe in an era where they didn't have good special effects and do like a sci-fi movie now. Yeah, that would be an obvious angle you could do. What would even fit that though? Let me think. I tell you what would be sick. Obviously, I would actually want also like the fucking, as you say, you've got infinite money here. So I would want like all the real people. So I'm not going to do this. I would want them to do it. But imagine if you could actually make a movie like 2001, but with like modern graphics, like the same spirit and the artist, but the modern, that would be fucking unbelievable, wouldn't it? Imagine how that'd be in the cinema, like an IMAX cinema with those giant ones. Be incredible, wouldn't it?
The problem with doing this with movies is that a lot of good movies, even if like 2001 is still a fucking great movie and still has awesome visuals, even with the constraints of its time. And like, for example, I prefer the visual effects of the original Star Wars movies because they were practical effects and they really kind of suited the grittiness of it. And like, they were really well done, even in the 70s and early 80s when they were making those movies. And I prefer them over like all the shiny CGI shit. So it's like, there are a lot of movies that I wouldn't really want to see upgraded at all. Or you have to remember too, that a lot of the reasons why great movies are great was because they were just made being innovative with the technology of their time, and they weren't overreaching to do like silly shit.
I know that is actually why the original Star Wars is so good. If you ever go and look at some of the ideas George Lucas had, he had some terrible ideas, but just necessity being the mother of invention. With the first movies, he had to like be a bit more limited, and he had to like cut things. And like the joke is, if he'd have had like the Avatar budget, he'd have made a shit movie. He'd have just made a garbage on all his ideas, wouldn't he?
And he did later, so we know what happens.
Yeah. Don't say that one, by the way. That's probably the dumbest thing about Star Wars ever. You know, the ones who because now they've sort of redeemed the prequels for themselves because of these new ones. Now they're like, bring back George Lucas. Right, this is a fact. And if you think about it, you'll understand why I'm right. George Lucas directed 4 Star Wars movies. The worst 4, you fucking idiot. Ones. So you don't want him to come back. It wouldn't be good, would it? He made the worst ones. What you really want is those fucking straight fire guys who made the second and third one to come and do it. That's what you really want. But anyway, I've got 2 movies I would change, and these changes would make both of them even better movies. Right? One's a very small one, and one's a big
change?
one. No, that one's fine. Right? One is the Christopher Nolan one, though, which is I would just go back and I would get the movie The Dark Knight. Right, you're all going to go and you'd save Heath Ledger's life, right? I don't really care that much. That can happen. What I would change, though, is that the movie The Dark Knight just needs to basically have the last act taken out. The whole act with Two-Face, that should be a movie.
100%.
If you just ended it when he essentially gets the Joker, and it's just about him and the Joker, the movie would be about 2 hours long, and it would be an amazing movie. It would have no filler. It would just be like really well paced. The last third really drags and sort of brings you in another. It's essentially got the same problem those DC superhero movies had. They try to make like 1.5 movies, and the other half always fails and sucks the energy out of the movie, you know.
Yeah, I agree. People love The Dark Knight because they only remember the good parts and not the fucking... And like, I think Aaron Eckhart does a really good job at playing Two-Face. It just has nothing to do with the rest of the movie and makes the movie bad. You could have just made it a different movie. I mean, frankly, like, you could also pick whatever the Bane one was. You could remake that movie 1,000,000 times. That movie fucking sucks, guys. Like, think about how memorable Tom Hardy is as Bane in that movie, and think about how fucking stupid that movie is, where he just comes into the stock exchange and like he like hacks Bruce Wayne's bank account and like downloads all his money. Like, that's the thing that could happen. That's the dumbest Deus Ex Machina shit ever. You could make 1,000,000 times better Bane movie because Tom Hardy killed it. A lot of the dialogue's really good. It's just the plot is terrible. Like, I would love to remake some of those movies and actually make them good.
Here's my one other tweak. And the sad thing is, there's another superhero movie, so it's going to sound like, oh, I'm a nerd shit. Like, no, it's just it's one that I've heard other people say, I didn't come up with this change. But when I heard it, it was actually genius, right? You know, the very first, the 2002 Spider-Man movie?
Yes.
Right? The dumbest thing they did in that movie, and this change, the second you even hear it, just makes instant, immediate sense, was you took a brilliant character actor, like Willem Dafoe, and put a mask over his face. What you should have done is just painted his face green. He's a fucking amazing. Remember that scene he does in the movie, in the mirror, where he's looking and he's seeing the alter ego? Yeah. It's fucking amazing. And then the rest of the movie, and the mask on, well, hey, Spider-Man, why have we got this actor? What are we doing? Like, you've just ruined it.
It's like V for Vendetta.
He also has a really ugly sort of twisted fit. That's what Willem Dafoe just looks like anyway. Like, you could have done that so much better, in my opinion, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing with V Vendetta. Like, what a waste again. It's just a mask, in it.
Hugo Weaving does nail that role, and he does amazing things with his voice.
I know.
But yeah.
Just the world in it. Yeah.
It always does feel sad when the entire movie is just him wearing a Guy Fawkes mask. So yeah, those are some good ones. I mean, I honestly, like, the real tipping point of Star Wars.
Great actor, actually, if you think about it. He's been mega in almost all the big roles he's had, hasn't he? Hugo Weaving.
Oh, he's
I'll even
great.
give people, if anyone wants like an obscure indie, like you want to see it movie, he did a movie in the late 90s in Australia called The Interview, and it is mega. It's one of those movies where it could be like a play, you know, it's only like a couple of people, and it's just mainly them and conversation and stuff, but like, it's like a sort of psychology. I won't give any clues away, but it's a really good movie. He does a mega job in it.
Also, if you want to see how good he is as a character actor, you should watch the Australian movie Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, where he plays one of 3 drag queens in a bus driving across the outback. It's fucking hilarious. Great movie.
I won't be watching that movie, but thanks for the recommendation anyway.
It's a good movie, man. It's a great movie.
It's
whatever. What is the longest you've had to fill on a broadcast? Like, I think we answered this on the.
I actually had this on the thing. Yeah.
On the watch party. It's probably like an hour, couple hours. Yeah, hour and a half, couple hours.
The other thing, what you might not know, if it goes beyond, I mean, an hour's even stretching it. If it goes beyond usually about 20, 30 minutes, they usually will cut to a break anyway, because that usually means you've got like some major tech problem and it's like indeterminate when they'll come back. So they actually are, the good TOs are smart enough to know you don't like burn a 3-hour fucking fill on like day one in the group stage. Like you just kill your talent, don't you? So usually we can't fill beyond a certain point because they'll just take you off the broadcast. They'll know like there's no point just having you loop back around the same topics again for 1 hour, is there?
Monte, we seem to share an affinity for Western cowboy iconography. Where did you develop / discover this? Well, I'm from Colorado, so that really helped. I just really like the cowboy aesthetic overall. I like handmade goods. So like cowboy boots I really love cowboy boots. They're very comfortable. I also love leather and the kind of artistry that goes into making them. I love cowboy hats.
Also loves Peyton Manning, the sheriff.
That's right. There you go. I love Western movies. Like I love that. I love Southwestern patterns. So I wear like a lot of Southwestern patterns. I basically only wear, besides my wedding ring, which is platinum, but I basically only wear sterling silver jewelry, and I only really wear turquoise. So I wear a lot of Navajo, handmade Navajo jewelry. So I like silver and turquoise as colors. I don't know. I just grew up in that environment of kind of this Western / Southwestern sensibility and really enjoy the aesthetic overall. I like what it symbolizes, which is kind of the wild open spaces of the West and the kind of independent do-it-yourself mentality that the West really holds, like the Western ideal. Let's put it that way. Best wombo combo you've seen. I'm still partial to the classic League of Legends Empire with the Nunu and the Bush and the Karthus ult for massive damage. Like that one's pretty fun. That's an all-time classic.
I mean, to me, that we actually don't get as many crazy wombo combos as you want, because you need certain champions. Like, I'll give you an obvious one. If you have like Zyra in the game, there's a great one. Like
MF.
the problem in the modern day is like most of those combos you don't really tend to make them in modern pro play. It's more like an old school thing, in it. There used to be some fucking sick ones though, for sure.
Yeah, I go for the classic, the Empire. A memorable failed LPL super team. Probably some of the Uzi ones. I don't know.
Got to be the one where Uzi I joined OMG. So you had, like, in theory, the best top side, and then Uzi I joined. And at the time, they even had that Cloud guy. Everyone was like, holy shit, like, just incredible. It didn't even make Worlds. It was irrelevant in the LPL, believe it or not. Because that one on paper, that was the ultimate example of like a super team that just doesn't even make sense, but they tried to make it,
Yep.
And it was a massive sign if people don't. It was one of the biggest blockbuster moves ever.
What is the LoL patch change that you've hated the most? The lane swap change, where they ham-fistedly like made top lane turrets more durable at the early stages of the game, which is just a change purely directed at professional play, limited a lot of strategic options within the game and the way that professionals play, because they wanted to make it like solo queue. So never a fan of that. Lowering the old skill ceiling.
It's the one where they just made those defensive masteries OP, and suddenly Dr. Mundo was the fucking like main champion in top lane. That was cancer, that fucking meta. By the way you knew it sucked was, right, here's the problem. In the modern day, right, if you're doing badly and you complain about what's making you do badly, people just say you're a sore loser, right? So actually what you have to do to get the point across is you have to do well, but then also be fair enough that you just say that it's shit. So I always thought it was actually sick that if you go back and watch my interviews, you can see all this. even though Suarez was the best top laner at the time, he even said, "Oh, this meta fucking sucks, and I hate it, and it makes me hate playing League of Legends where I have to just play like Renekton into Shyvana into Doctor." Like, yeah, even he admitted it, and he was the best. So if the best players in the world, by the way, are like nerf the please change my role. You've probably got some flaws in that role. So I wasn't a fan of that patch. I thought it was like anti-League of Legends, mate. It was anti-League of Legends.
Assuming that you followed a bit of the case of Deshaun Watson and the 24 accusation of sexual assault, do you either of you think the NFL will suspend him for more than a year, or will he get to play for the Browns already this year?
Wasn't it already like the rumor that he's going to probably have to sit out the year or something?
The rumor is right now that he'll face an indefinite suspension, which I definitely think is the right call because these accusations like continue to come out. So until all of it is reasonably settled, I mean, and also like, I mean, 24 people is just fucking crazy. And also he had like 66 massage therapists in like 2 or 3 years, which is obviously extremely suspicious. I think he needs to be suspended until this is all fully investigated because it's too fucking crazy.
Innocent until proven guilty.
I mean, technically, he wasn't indicted by the criminal courts, but that doesn't mean he's innocent of, you know.
Doesn't matter. I can't know anything about these cases.
Well, that's why I think it needs to be investigated. I mean, there's just too much going on. Like, I think you have to suspend him. Yeah. It seems like a bad situation. Is there a Dune book you would recommend stopping at? This is definitely a Thorin question. I've only read the first 4, so I don't know if there are any good ones.
Okay, here's the answer. Stop at the 6th one.
Okay.
And basically, when Frank Herbert isn't writing anymore, stop. There you go. Problem solved. All the original 6 are mega.
Just randomly checked in the LCL spring playoffs were canceled. The league isn't running anymore. Are there any CIS? Yeah. I don't think there are Russian esports operating currently by non-Russian run esports. Maybe Dota? Is Dota still operating?
What do you mean?
Are there a lot of Russian teams in Dota? Are they still operating like Russian Dota tournaments?
As in Russia itself? I don't know about that. Like, I know, like, in Counter-Strike, for example, you can still play. If you have the visa, you can still play in the West. It's just you have to have the visa. The problem, basically, the reason why it doesn't surprise me they shut the LCL down is basically, as far as I can tell, go read Richard Lewis's work for this, because he's outlining this all. As far as I can tell, people thought I was exaggerating, but I nailed this genuinely, Monty, something like weeks into that whole thing happening in February. I said the outcome from this, likely, in light of how people have ramped up the sanctions and all the things that have happened since, the likelihood is, unfortunately, there's going to be a virtual iron curtain in esports. And what will happen is they can't come to the West beyond rare exceptions who can get like citizenship in Serbia or something. But there's going to be like, for example, the grassroots people, there's not even going to be an org that's going to pick them up. So what's going to happen is I imagine they will just live in their own little world where it'll just be either only Russians playing each other or it'll be Russia plus whatever their allies are. Maybe they have China or Turkey. I don't know who they're going to be ally with, but they might have their own little circuit. So unfortunately, they effectively won't be part of our circuit anymore. It seems like it's going to go.
It's really cool, by the way, Thorin, that we have now basically, a lot of the esports ecosystem, most of it, the vast majority of it, is now owned by either developers or tournament operators that have very strong financial ties to regimes with human rights violations of a variety of different countries, right? And so what's fucked up is like, okay, we live in this world, but those same companies are now the ones who are blacklisting Russia for human rights violations. So like if we're just going to be tied to people who violate human rights, why do we have to punish the Russians? In this case, the Russian people who are esports players, who those people haven't done anything wrong. It's not in their fucking control. So we have to punish them while propping up these other ones. So can't we just have all of the human rights violators be okay instead of just picking and choosing and virtue signaling that some are okay and some are not okay? Like this is the worst outcome of all of it, right?
It's the worst. They've genuinely created in esports the worst of all worlds. Like you get all the stupid, petty, pointless things and trying to kill someone and end the whole career over a joke, and then on the other hand, you turn around and go, "Actually, Mr. Mass Murderer, thank you for the money. Continue." Great. What a great scene, eh? I wonder why Rich Lewis is leaving. And you're all going to go, because he's weak and because he does this thing on Twitter. No, because people like you exist. That's why. That's the real reason why.
Yeah. All right. Can Immortals be saved and how? Yes, they can, by changing their name to MIBR, by having the restrictions on Brazilian players counting as imports to the LCS lifted so they can have a full Brazilian roster instantly saved. There you go.
Also got some decent pieces still. They could easily lead with that team.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were under a lot of pressure. We know from having Revenge on the show about putting this roster together. It's not like they have the worst players. They just have terrible synergy and, they're somehow less than the sum of their parts. You could save this roster. It's not like Power of Evil is the worst fucking mid laner in the LCS. It's not like Revenge is still good for an NA top laner. Like there's Ignar, come on. It was always said the lack of developmental league was a big reason for NA's lack of success. After the expansion of Tier 2 in the past couple of years, it's arguably done nothing to develop good talent. Good talent like Value / Five Fire are still falling through the cracks after it becomes clear that expanded development leagues and Champions Queue don't solve NA's fundamental issues. What will be the next excuse that everyone will cling to? I don't know why they keep offering excuses. The server just doesn't have any people on it. Like, it's a small server. There's not enough competition to generate competitive players. That's it. It's not. I don't understand why they won't just say that. Like, just fucking come out and say.
The problem is, on some level, here's what they can't wrap their brain around. They always come in with the assumption that it is possible to just be the best and be American. They think, well, because I'm born American, why can't I just be the best? He's just giving you a reason. Like, you wouldn't have to just even be good. You'd have to all be, like, disproportionately better than your direct peer in Korea, because there's more of them. And more of them are trying to play, and more of them are in the solo queue ranked, and more of them are trying to get on pro teams, and more of them are doing trials and tryouts and playing 16 hours a day. So, like, once you match those numbers, then we can start switching other variables. You're not even close to the numbers.
Yeah, it's mostly just a number of players and effort problem within NA, but we just have to deal with the reality that not that many people in NA play League of Legends compared to the other regions, and that's why it's less competitive. It's not complicated. I don't know what to say. Like, NA just as a region takes esports less seriously. We always have smaller pools of players except in console titles because that's what NA plays, and nobody else plays on consoles except for Japan. That's just it. That's just how we live our lives in NA. Europe has a lot more players. Asia has a lot more players, and they have a lot more serious players as well. What accents do you think we need to hear more of, whether as casters or on the analyst desk?
I mean, there's loads of British ones you'll never hear because everyone just has the London accent or whatever southern accent, Like, I think essentially, here's the problem: I can never know as a non-Brit how you tune into the accent. But like, think about like if you ever watch like Peaky Blinders, like Birmingham accent, super unique.
Yep, that'd be Scottish would be great.
Could have loads of character if you were a really good caster in one of those. Yeah.
It's hard because a lot of accents that are had by non-native English speakers are not particularly great to listen to.
It's why one of the key things, the real pro tip / hack is for one of those people to just live in the UK. Like, spoiler, the reason why Troublelink has a really great sounding accent, even though she's got a Greek accent, doesn't sound like Forgiven, where I knew this guy and I could barely understand him. It's because I think she lived in the UK at some point or something. Like, she has like a sort of a London twang to it, and so she sounds totally understandable to me. I've never had any problem with her accent. So I'm trying to think what's actually a good one. You know what? Here's what's mad. He's never on broadcast, so you'll sadly never get it. But I actually, even though other people think it sounds silly, I actually really like where you have an accent when you speak English, like Nelson's, where you sort of like, it's got like, because everything sounds like you've rounded the edges off everything. Nothing's harsh. It's sort of just like you just drop out of a word. You never just go hard, straight point to that. It's got, I think it sounds really good to my ear. I know people think it's a bit broken, but it sounds great. You're talking about it has like a lyrical quality to it. I love it.
Sure. Two more questions. Inside the NBA is an Emmy-winning show, which I might argue makes use of similar characters that you guys employ in some of your shows. Why is it that characters like Kenny Smith are integral to this kind of dynamic that plebs like me don't understand? A common sentiment among the laymen is that they would prefer this kind of character removed. And while I do not necessarily... You need a straight man, guys. That's the thing. You need a straight man, right?
What they don't know is this, yes. Basically, by the way, this is one of the most famous pleb takes of all time. The pleb take goes like this. Kenny the Jet Smith, first of all, he wasn't the best player. So like, you're fucking nobody. How can he talk with Shaq and Charles Barkley? Get him off. Get someone in there. And they would always just pick a famous player, right? What they don't know is this. I'm not joking. Kenny Smith is literally the engine of that fucking desk, mate. Because one, if you notice, he's one of the only ones that sets everyone else up. He's like a fucking point guard. He like sets Charles Barkley up for the joke he knows. Spoiler, I can tell by the way they interact. Charles Barkley says that joke in the green room, and then Kenny Smith is sort of prodding him to say it now live. He's not really coming up with all that fire off the top of his head. Then secondly, if you notice, because Shaq on that show is a mad little bitch, he has chilled out over the years, but he started off like with totally the wrong attitude for a fun show like that, as in he would actually get his feelings hurt, Monty, when people zinged him on fucking Inside the NBA, and people know this. He would just go to the same whack thing in the same way as he told me he'd beat me up. He would just keep going to Charles Barkley like, where's the rings, it's like, that can't be the only go-to, mate. Like, where's your fucking IQ? How about that? You couldn't even count your rings, you dumb fuck. So you know what I mean? Anyone can banter, mate. There's always banter coming back. So Kenny is also really good at knowing when to like prod Shaq a little bit, but not in a way that will like hurt his feelings, so he can be about. So basically, yeah. And lastly, because he's the lowest status accomplished player and celebrity figure of the people, as Monty says, he also has to sometimes be the straight man and just take the banter and take the abuse and be the one who's the butt of the joke. Because there's another thing, you can't all be the one getting the joke off. Someone has to be the jobber in the WWE analogy and lose the match. Like, someone has to get put over. Like, essentially, there's a lot of skill to like what someone like him does. That I agree with the question that a casual fan isn't going to see it, because the joke is what you think you enjoy. It's like what I always say about my shows. No, but you're really obnoxious and you talk to me. Yeah, but if you like that really good answer, it only came because of what I just did beforehand. You cannot deny that part. So if you like what the person does in the initial part and the outcome, you secretly like it all, because it's all part of the same pastiche, as it were.
It's also the straight man is a stand-in for the reaction of the audience member. Yes. Where if somebody's considered super zany, like Charles Barkley, right, then you are actually, as the average pleb, your reaction is probably similar to the straight man's reaction on the show. So what the straight man can do is feign like kind of an appalled reaction, or like, you know, because he validates your own, like the average person's reaction to that experience and makes it so it's comfortable, right? So if somebody does something that's really zany and that person's laughing along, or that person's like, you know, feigning a little shock or whatever, it actually normalizes the craziness. Right. So it really is kind of that person serves as an emotional resonator for the average fan reaction. Right.
It's why the one thing that really tilts me, Monty, is when as a host, you purposely ask a question you know the answer to and sound stupid, because you have to do that so the other guy can answer the bloody question for everyone else who doesn't know that. And then the idiot fan on Reddit goes like, he doesn't even know that. It's like, you know how terrible an interview would be if it just go, well, I know the answer, so actually skip that question. Next thing, like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to set it up. That's why I even sometimes say I'm going to sound really stupid now, but because it makes the answer more effective if you just ask in a very naive, open-ended way. You know. Sadly, by the way, it's the real reason why you are all plebs in esports. As in, when you're going like, but this cast is blah, 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 it's like, you don't even know that, because unfortunately, it takes a lot of technical ability and like industry understanding to even know how he's doing something good, what he's doing, how people set him up, what the broadcast. There's so much nuance to it. It's basically just enjoy the product. It's so complicated. You won't know it unless you've done years of this shit.
LCS viewership is the lowest it's ever been, and teams like Immortals get no engagement on their tweets. This is true. If you guys are running LCS, where you can change almost anything you want, talent, show segments, league/tournament format, how quickly could you turn LCS around? It's really hard at this stage, guys. I think even if you know what you're doing, like, you know, the ship's already like half sunk. So even if you were to make it really good, I'm not sure that you can pique people's interest, because unfortunately, you're probably not getting a lot of new esports fans to League of Legends, because every year that goes by, the game becomes more complicated, which makes it harder for new people to get in. And a lot of the current esports fans have already made up their mind about LCS, because if you're hardcore enough to still be watching it, you probably want to watch better competition, which means you're watching one of the other regions, one of the other three major regions. LCS kind of sucks in terms of competitiveness, so you may not be particularly interested in it. They haven't done anything interesting until recently with their product or their broadcast, but I do think you need to. The only hope is to really mix it up. Like, I think you have to present the players very differently. I think you have to make talent changes. You know, there are people on that broadcast who have been around for a very long time who I do not think are bad at their jobs, but I think you have to make some changes just to keep it fresh, you know, frankly. Like, I don't know where you go with a lot of this talent, but like, you know, if you've been on LCS for a decade, maybe it's time to get some new casters or go a different direction. And again, it's not because I think these people are bad. It's just that I think it has become very stale.
The main area I would just lean heavily into, like I alluded to earlier about the WWE angle, is narrative story building, because it's the one thing you can control that is separate and independent to the player's ability and how good the region is. So, for example, one thing I would genuinely suggest to LCS teams is there are two routes you can take. Either be the best and try and win LCS and go to Worlds. Spoiler, most you can't do that. Or the other angle is have an identity. So we've banged on it in the past, but they're an obvious example, right? In theory, now EG is trying to just be the best, aren't they? But to me, the idea they had that whole slogan, it's a great slogan, like live evil, but they didn't even lean into it. Like, they should genuinely have made it like, we're the villains of the LCS. Like, I would have had Jizuki and I would hire Dardock as a jungler, and I would make the team around that angle like, we're the bad boys. In fact, our whole angle is we're not even trying to be the fucking popular ones. Fuck everyone. We're punk rock. We're here to wreck everyone. I would make teams like that. I would have a team where, yes, you hire LS, but you hire LS for the freak show. You hire him and you go, you have total control. Any players you want, any system you want, any practice approach you want, any drafting you want, you do it, because my whole thing is, it's your team, it's the LS team. I would have a team where I had like Dom as the coach or something, and have his role, bring in his sort of a players. Even when you have a guy like Peter Dunn, you haven't lent into it. It'd be like the guy who built Mad Lions, so I'd have him only bringing in rookies and Ross. That'd be that whole identity. Because this way you can still compete, but you've got a totally unique reason, a compelling reason to not only follow the team, but I'm also hinting at you what my future path's going to be. Like, you now know if some bad boy support comes along and he's sort of in and out on other teams, maybe I'm going to sign him to my EG team that's going to live evil. If you got some wacky player comes along who's just a one-trick champion or something, maybe LS is going to sign him because he thinks that's going to be in the meta. Like, this is actually a cool angle. And also, by the way, the broadcast should go totally in this direction. I'll tell you right now, anyone who watches the LCS broadcast, random fans, and pretends they're watching it for like deep tactical macro, they're not. Make it only narratives. Make it all hyper narratives. By the way, even do the one you're doing with like Danny and Joe, but just make it more that. Make it like have like Bjergsen and Jensen and all the boomer mid lanes trash talk Jojo and be like, he's not ready yet. Like, that's what I would do. I would go hard in that angle, because again, like I say, I can't make the players better. I can't make the regions better, but I can make the storylines cooler. I can make them actually, some storylines exist to connect teams together.
Yeah, and I think the difference is, at least with the casters and on the talent side, what LEC has done is that they have empowered their casters' strengths and used resources to like, you know, with Dracos and Vedius, like being able to create music. Like, they've actually invested resources to help these people make content. And you can tell that they're a team that comes up with a lot of ideas and plays to the strengths of their casters and empowers them, right? I think and these people are highly motivated to make this kind of content. And I don't want to necessarily blame the NA casters, because the producers in that region, up until recently, have been not good, like bad. And so they haven't empowered the casters. So I think many of those casters have not been motivated to put in extra effort to do these things, because they've been shot down or not had those opportunities, or it's been a waste of time, frankly. But I think at this point in time, that option needs to go back onto the table. And if people are not willing to step up and do the extra work and operate as a team and learn from what LEC has done to collaborate, to play to your strengths as a group of talent, then those people need to be fired. Because the level of complacency is just insane, I would say. And I don't think it's entirely their fault. I think that has been bred into them by being with some really bad producers, but still needs to be fixed. And
also, even though this will be really unpopular, I would go to a best of 3 format, and here's why. Because I think the current format sucks. I don't want to watch 8 different best of 1s in a row. What is that? That's nothing. That's like when you go, you'll appreciate this, Monte. You know, when you go on aeroplanes, and they still do that thing in the modern day, Monte, where they go like TV section, and you go in there and it's like How I Met Your Mother, season 5, episode 17. You're like, well, I've never seen that before. Right. Well, you can watch Modern Family, season 8, episode 4. But I've never watched that before. Well, you can watch The Sopranos, season 4, episode 6. It's like, just put a fucking season on already. Like, no one wants to watch TV that way. You want to watch the whole thing in a row. So what I would say is this, the reason why I would go to BO3 is because I'm not going to watch CLG FlyQuest anyway. But I'll tell you what, I'll watch the fuck out of Team Liquid Cloud9 best of 3. And in fact, I'll build my whole night around that like a sport. If that starts at 10 p.m. local time, I'll build my whole night like at 9. I'll watch the pre-game. I'll get ready. Right, map 1, no one, let phone off, everyone. Now it's a fucking experience like sports. I think just the weekly LCS format, I think it's whack. I think it was always whack, plus. I was never a fan. I never enjoyed it, mate.
Well, it's also the fact that nobody's forcing them to do double round robin. They could do single round robin with best of 3s, and it would take probably approximately the same amount of time, because obviously the average game time would be 2.5, but you save time because you're not switching out players in between games and creating more breaks, right? Like you can actually compact it. So it would probably in total not take that much more time than the current broadcasts, except it would be a lot easier and more enticing for people to follow. Like the annoying thing about LCS is the only reason people are like, well, the bad games wouldn't get viewership. The only reason the bad games get viewership right now is because it's a fucking waiting room for the next game that doesn't suck balls. Nobody's there, like you're saying, to watch the bottom teams play against each other. It's just that it's short enough to get to the next thing, but then it depresses the viewership of the actual good games as well, because it's not a best of 3. It doesn't last the same amount of time. There isn't as much time to get involved into it, right? So I don't know. Like, the other thing is, as we talked about earlier on this show, the way you save LCS is by opening it up to a lot more players from more regions, making it a more international league, and then activating the fan bases from those regions. Because otherwise, there's no point in being a lower tier team, because there's no financial incentive, because they made a really bad league that doesn't actually make any sense for bad teams to put in money, right? And you know that Riot believes this, because they're not doing it with Valorant. You know that they believe this because they're not doing the same model with Valorant. And in fact, what they're doing is they're picking partner teams and giving them some money, right? So they keep that incentive, but it's not a guarantee that they're always going to be in the league.
Approach.
Yeah. But this would be like if Valve gave the good teams that they liked some money. So
it's like what ESL and them do anyway, though, with the rev share of the partner teams.
It gives them an advantage, right? It gives you an advantage, but it does not guarantee that you're going to be good if you don't make aggressive decisions or invest money on your own, which I actually think is a good system. Like, credit to Riot. Like, the more I think about this Valorant idea, the more I like what they're doing with it. But yeah, there is a reason why they're not franchising Valorant. All right, that's it. We'll see you guys next week for another episode of Summoning Insight. Till then.